Chapter 743. Zhou Qing Quan. Someone is looking for you. Zhou Qing Quan saw his colleague looking at him mockingly, and he knew that something bad was about to happen. He didn't know if it was because of Zhou Qing Quan's harmless appearance, but ever since he entered the Ministry of Transport, almost all the bad luck in the ministry was handed over to him. Everyone was used to letting Zhou Qing Quan take the blame. If it wasn't for the fact that this was a job that everyone envied, Zhou Qing Quan might have resigned already. Brother Wang, can you tell me what good thing is coming to me? Zhou Qing Quan forced a smile and asked his colleague. How would I know if you ask me? Brother Wang chuckled. This person is now in the living room. Originally, he came directly to the minister, but seeing the minister's bad luck, he threw this matter to you without even meeting him. You should be more tolerant. Why don't you take responsibility for this? Zhou Qing Quan cursed in his heart. However, Zhou Qing Quan was still very curious. Who could make the minister so bad luck that he didn't even want to meet him? Zhou Qing Quan rushed to the living room anxiously. As soon as he saw the person sitting on the sofa, Zhou Qing Quan suddenly realized that it was this big boss. No wonder the minister didn't even want to meet him. This kind of big boss with a sword was the most difficult to serve, as the minister dealing with this kind of thing was just asking to be humiliated. Sir Gahan, didn't I tell you that you have 3 days? You don't have to be in such a hurry. Zhou Qing Quan quickly put a cup of fragrant tea in front of Gahan and said with a smile. It was hard to imagine that this was a civil servant of the Ministry of Transport. Under normal circumstances, which civil servant of the Ministry of Transport didn't have a good expression on their face, and their mouth didn't have a good word. They would try to delay the whole process, and if they could delay it for 4 days, they wouldn't delay it for 3 days. It was rare to see a civil servant like this who came to deliver tea with a smile. Those who didn't know the situation would think that this person had something on the Ministry of Transport. They wouldn't have thought that Gahan was a criminal suspect in a serious speeding case. May I know why Mr. Gahan is here? Zhou Qing Quan asked carefully. You must be joking. Didn't you ask me to come? I should be the one asking you what you want me to do. Gahan looked at Zhou Qing Quan in confusion. Slap. If he wasn't facing Gahan, Zhou Qing Quan would have slapped himself. He seriously wondered if his brain was filled with shit. That was why he was possessed by a ghost, and asked Gahan why he was here. I'm sorry, I didn't sleep well last night. Zhou Qing Quan was telling the truth. He really didn't sleep well last night. The thing is, did you drive a Yanhuang 3008 Super Maglev sport car from Yanjing City's 5th Ring Road to the core area between 6:30 p.m. and 6:55 p.m. on October 21st? Zhou Qing Quan asked worriedly. He was worried that what if Gahan refused to admit it? What if he quarreled with her and left the Ministry of Transport? What if the minister forced him to take responsibility for this matter? Zhou Qing Quan's mind was filled with countless conjectures, and every conjecture ended with his own unfortunate figure. That's right. That person was me. Gahan's answer made Zhou Qing Quan let out a long sigh of relief. Since the other party had voluntarily admitted it, this matter could be considered half settled. Then, Sir Gahan, can you cooperate with us and accept a simple punishment? Speaking up to this point, Zhou Qing Quan's heart was in his throat again. He was afraid that Gahan would refuse to accept any punishment. No problem. I did indeed race on the street. The mistake was made by me, and I should accept the punishment. Gahan smiled and nodded. This made Zhou Qing Quan feel more at ease. Please take a look. Are these conditions okay? Do you have any objections? Zhou Qing Quan carefully handed a document to Gahan. This document simply listed the punishment that Gahan would receive. Sir, please take a look. If you feel that there's anything wrong with it, or if the amount is too high, we can amend it at any time. We can change it at any time, and we can discuss it well. Zhou Qing Quan's words had completely embarrassed the government. Since when was it easy to discuss the fines of the traffic department? Was there such a government in this world? Gahan looked at the punishment on the document and was shocked. It was not that the conditions of the punishment were too high, but too low. It was so low that Gahan felt a little embarrassed. First of all, this document did not have any detention type of punishment. It only required Gahan to sign an apology and pay a fine of 10,000 renminbi. This matter would end just like that. For a sword wielder, what kind of punishment was 10,000 renminbi? It was just the money for a meal. This 10,000 renminbi was probably only an administrative fine. Guhan had damaged a lot of public property on the way here, so it was reasonable to say that he should also pay a lot of money. However, the punishment notice did not mention a word about this punishment. Obviously, this loss was silently borne by the traffic department themselves. Zhou Qingquan carefully observed Guhan's expression. He was afraid that the other party was dissatisfied with the punishment conditions of the traffic department. According to the method that the department head had instructed him yesterday, as long as the other party was willing to admit his mistake and pay a small fine, this matter would be considered over. Even the Yanhuang 3008 that caused the accident could be returned to the other party. Speaking of the Yanhuang 3008, Zhou Qingquan felt a headache coming on. The Yanhuang 3008 had crashed through many checkpoints along the way, destroying many police cars and buses. It had also suffered heavy injuries, and the entire roof had been torn off. In order to resolve this matter as soon as possible, the traffic department even used their own money to repair the Yanhuang 3008. The total repair cost was more than 10 million renminbi, which was 1,000 times the amount of the fine. Unlike before the apocalypse, when every department had their own private coffers, at this time, the budgets of all the government departments were in the hands of the highest level AI. Every department expenditure had to go through the approval of the highest level AI. Therefore, this 10 million renminbi repair cost could not be paid with the public funds of the traffic department. Zhou Qingquan heard that from next month onwards, all the civil servants of the traffic department would be deducted 1,000 renminbi from their salaries until the 10 million renminbi was made up. Inside and outside of the Yanjing City's traffic department, there were only about 1,000 people. This would take a full 10 months to make up for it. This 1,000 renminbi might not be much to the big shots, but for Zhou Qingquan, who did not earn much in the first place, it almost made him cry blood. Not good, not good. Guhan threw the punishment document on the table and said, while shaking his head. Hearing Guhan say this, Zhou Qingquan was so anxious that he was about to cry. Sir Guhan, if you think the fine is too high, we can discuss it again. Otherwise, you could just pay 5,000 renminbi. Sir, you have to understand us. The council has been forcing us to give a result, and we dare not take a single cent from you. Hey, this is not a matter of money. Guhan shook his head. Zhou Qingquan was stunned for a moment, and suddenly had a look of realization. This Guhan definitely did not want to sign the letter of apology. For a sword bearer, what was 10,000 renminbi? The most important thing was his own face. Signing the letter of apology was equivalent to losing a lot of face. This sword bearer, who had once been the master of the Yuzhong Sword Pavilion, definitely did not want to lose face. If possible, Zhou Qingquan did not want this stupid letter of apology. It was not like he could eat it, but there was no other way. The sword bearer wanted face, and so did the council. Without this letter of apology, the council and the Ministry of Transport would all be embarrassed, and this matter would not be resolved. Zhou Qingquan had no choice but to plead with Guhan again and persuade him to sign the letter of apology. Guhan has grown up, and the Ministry of Transport is really in trouble. The council is in charge, and the people are complaining. Our Weibo has tens of thousands of comments every day saying that the Ministry of Transport only cares about fines and doesn't care about traffic. How would they know the pain of the Ministry of Transport? Every one of us is living like a dog. Zhou Qingquan began to make a long speech. As he spoke, a few drops of tears flowed from the corner of his eyes. Everything had been fine, but now it had become a complaining session. You don't have to say anymore. Let me ask you, after I sign this letter of apology, what will you do with it? Will it be made public? Guhan asked, interrupting Zhou Qingquan's tearful complaint. No, absolutely not. Zhou Qingquan immediately patted his chest and promised. This is what we will use to explain to the higher-ups. We promise that it will never be made public. I dare to guarantee with my job and personal dignity that this is just used to fool the higher-ups. I see. It seems that I can't sign this letter of apology, Gohan said resolutely. In an instant, Zhou Qingquan was speechless, and he was completely stunned. Zhou Qingquan's eyes had lost all the light, and there was only darkness left, as if the whole world had collapsed. I'd better resign and go home to sell sweet potatoes. Zhou Qingquan thought silently, and was ready to get up and leave. If this letter of apology is not made public, how can I express my apology? How can I reflect the dignity of the law? How can I learn from past mistakes and deter people who want to race in Yinjing City in the future? Gohan said righteously, and Zhou Qingquan, who was just about to stand up and leave, was so scared that he sat back down again. What is this situation? What does this sword-bearer, Gohan, want to say? Why don't I seem to understand a word? Before Zhou Qingquan could figure out what happened, he heard Gohan say again, this letter of apology must not be made public. It must be published and let everyone see it. Only then can it serve as a warning to future generations. So, I decided that I will publish an apology letter on the internet, newspapers, and TV, expressing my apology for the racing incident, and warning the future generations to never make this kind of mistake like me. Section Chief Zhou, do you think I can deal with it this way? After that, Gohan looked at Zhou Qingquan with a smile and asked, Yes, yes. Zhou Qingquan could really do it this time. Chapter 744. There's also the issue of the fine. The amount is too little. How can 10,000 be enough? I think it should be at least 1 million renminbi. Otherwise, how can we learn from past mistakes to avoid future mistakes? Gohan looked at the punishment document and said, Yes, yes. Zhou Qingquan, who was still in a state of confusion, could only reply in a low voice. There's also the issue of compensation for damage to public facilities. Why isn't it written on this list? I remember that I hit and damaged 32 maglev police cars, 46 maglev buses, 120 street lamps, and some other things that I can't remember. How much do I have to pay? Yes. Since you don't have the statistics, I'll give you a number. I think it's 10 million yuan. Do you think it's enough for the compensation? Gohan waved his hand, and 10 million yuan was sent out. Yes, yes. And my Yanhuang 3008 Super Maglev flying car. That's the car that caused the accident. How can you get back to me? They should detain that super hover flying car in the Ministry of Transportation forever. In the future, when there's a Spectrum Technique Publicity Week, Traffic Safety Week, we can bring this car out for display during the Public Travel Week to warn those who intend to break the law. We can tell them that Yinjing City does not allow car racing, and violators will have their tools confiscated. Section Chief Zhou, do you think this is okay? Yes, yes. Zhou Qingquan was still immersed in his yes world until Gohan shook his body and handed a new revised traffic accident handling opinion to Zhou Qingquan. Zhou Qingquan woke up from his own world. Section Chief Zhou, please see if you can handle it according to the suggestions in this letter. Zhou Qingquan received the new letter in a daze. He almost jumped out of his chair after reading it. When he finished reading the entire letter, he was so excited that he couldn't even speak. After the revision, the traffic proposal was completely different from the original one. Not only did Gohan have to publish a letter of apology on the internet, newspapers, and television, he also had to pay a 1 million RMB administrative fine and 10 million RMB compensation for the damage to public property. He also had to leave a large number of Yanhuang 3008 in the Ministry of Transport as a warning to future generations. What else could Zhou Qingquan say when he saw such a resolution? This made the Ministry of Transport, which had been prepared to swallow this huge loss, suddenly turn around. Not only did they gain face, but they also received an additional income of nearly 80 million yuan for no reason. If the old minister who resigned a few days ago knew that things would turn out like this, he would probably vomit blood and die at home. For Zhou Qingquan, if this letter was really finalized, then Zhou Qingquan, would become the first hero of the Ministry of Transportation. His status in the Ministry of Transportation would instantly rise. Everyone had to remember Zhou Qingquan's kindness. Even the head of the Ministry of Transportation owed Zhou Qingquan. In the assessment that would take place a few months later, his position would definitely be moved up. But was there really such a good thing in the world? Zhou Qingquan couldn't believe it. Lord Gahan, is what you wrote in this letter true? If there's no problem, I'll hand it over to our minister to make a new decision. Zhou Qingquan said urgently. He couldn't wait to take the written opinion away to prevent Gahan from going back on his word. Wait. Gahan pressed his hand on the written opinion and said with a smile, Actually, I have a small favor that I hope Chief Zhou can help me with. Sure enough, there was no free lunch in this world. This Gahan really wanted him to do something to make a deal. But what exactly did Gahan want him to do? Would it be a crime that would endanger the entire Ministry of Transportation? Or a conspiracy that was very dangerous and might even put his future and life on the line? Thinking of this, Zhou Qingquan was completely at a loss. He didn't know if he should agree to the deal with the devil Gahan. It's not a difficult thing. I like to collect some old maps. This time I came to Yinjing City. I want to collect all the city maps of Yinjing City since its founding. But you also know that I'm from Yuzhong City. Your Yinjing City sword-bearer doesn't seem to think highly of me and is unwilling to fulfill my small wish. There's no other way. I can only ask Chief Zhou to help me with this small favor. I guarantee that as long as Section Chief Zhou can help me get a map of Yinjing City that has been mapped and revised every year since the founding of Yinjing City, I will sign this letter of settlement and guarantee that it will be completed without any discount. I can post the letter of apology on the internet in front of you and send it to the newspapers and television stations. All the money as compensation will also be paid in full without delay. Gahan's request made Zhou Qingquan fall into silence. It wasn't that he thought Gahan's conditions were too much. On the contrary, Gahan's conditions were too small. It was so small that Zhou Qingquan felt a little guilty. It would be extremely difficult for others to get their hands on these maps of Yinjing City. But for the staff of the Ministry of Transportation, it couldn't be any easier. The information wasn't even classified, so it was impossible for it to cause any harm to Yinjing City. Therefore, these maps were all stored in the Ministry of Transportation's public server. Any member of the Ministry of Transportation could freely download them without any problems. Zhou Qing felt that he was silent because he couldn't figure out if Gahan's words were true or not. Was he really just doing this for his own desire to collect? Zhou Qingquan was afraid that Gahan's deal had some malicious intentions. Wasn't this how it was portrayed on TV? A seemingly insignificant piece of information could cause a major change in the entire world. If things went wrong, Zhou Qingquan might even become a sinner in history. F***CK? What does being a sinner in history have to do with me? I can't even keep my rice bowl. Why would I care about being a sinner in history? Zhou Qingquan made up his mind and nodded at Gahan. No problem. Sir Gahan, please wait here for a moment. I will copy all the information over now. Thank you. Gahan's lips curled up slightly. A few hours later, an apology letter signed by Gahan was posted on some platforms. However, these apology letters were only posted in some inconspicuous corners, such as in the middle of a newspaper advertisement, on the bottom of a TV station screen, or in an ordinary thread on an online forum. Therefore, this apology letter didn't cause any waves. No one knew that the previous head of the Sword Tower in Yuzhong City had actually posted such an apology letter. It wasn't until many years later, when Gahan's fame spread all over the world, that this apology letter was unearthed by a tabloid reporter and made public, causing an uproar. Everyone who saw this apology letter praised Gahan as a man of noble character, a man who dared to admit his mistakes, and the greatest person of this era. As a result, this apology letter that originally admitted his mistakes became a heroic deed of Gahan to prove his noble character. Things in the world were just that ridiculous. Zhou Qingquan indeed benefited from this misfortune. He was promoted one rank. Later, it was said that his luck was off the charts, and his career was incomparably successful. In the end, he became a standing member of the Yinjing City Council and a great figure in Yinjing City. There was a special mapping department in Yinjing City's Ministry of Transportation. Every year, they would draw a map of Yinjing City and save it. This precious information fell into Gahan's hands so easily. Starting from the year 2068, when Yinjing City was founded, the map of Yinjing City was in Guhan's hands every year. Through these maps, Guhan could see the vicissitudes and changes of Yinjing City in the past 1,000 years, as well as the huge development. Guhan started his search from the year I Ching ascended to the throne, and sure enough, he found a road called Liberation Road in the core area of Yinjing City. But just 10 years later, the core area of Yinjing City changed its name, and the original name of Liberation Road was changed to another road a few kilometers away. Just 2 years later, the name of the road changed again, and it became another road that was quite a distance away. After that, the location of Liberation Road never changed again. It was not until more than 60 years later that Liberation Road was completely removed. From then on, there was no road named Liberation Road in Yinjing City. Therefore, it was obvious that the Liberation Road Guhan was looking for was definitely one of the 3 Liberation Roads. Then the question became, which one was the true path to liberation? Guhan's first goal was to temporarily set the last path of liberation. The reason was very simple. During the time I Ching was alive, the last Liberation Road had existed for the longest time, a full 60 years, so the possibility of the last Liberation Road was naturally the highest. Compared to the current map, the last Liberation Road corresponded to a road called Hongru Road. From a name, it was obvious that this road was named after Hongru Jiandi. This was also the basic rule for naming roads in all cities. Every time a Jiandi was born in their city, they would also choose a road in the core area to be named after this Jiandi to show respect for Jiandi. And if this Jiandi's contribution was great enough that all Jiandi felt ashamed of themselves, then all 8 major cities would have a road named after this Jiandi. For example, Zhejiang Jiandi or Kinzu. The most recent Jiandi to achieve this was Gujin Jiandi. According to the map, 700 years ago, Liberation Road was a small road, and both sides of the road were densely packed with residential buildings. But now, Hongru Road had become a commercial street, and there were all kinds of shops on both sides of the road. After a lot of effort, Guhan finally found the location of number 87 on the old map. However, the original residential building had disappeared, and in its place was a Chanel pork restaurant. Guhan and Chanel were really fated. Chapter 745. Waiter, give me 100 kilograms of red braised meat first. Guhan threw Qingpin, who was sitting in the infant pouch on his chest, onto the table. Before Qingpin could ask for meat, Guhan took the initiative to help Qingpin get 100 kilograms of red braised meat. This time, only Qingpin went out with Guhan. Guyan was still sleeping at home. Juzi's situation was very special. She couldn't move and could only stay at home. Etian went out to find wine early in the morning. Guhan didn't want to disturb her mood, so only Qingpin followed Guhan at this time. Qingpin likes Guhan the most. Come, give me a kiss. Qingpin jumped onto Guhan's shoulder from the table and gave a big kiss to Guhan's face. She even licked Guhan's ear with her little tongue, making Guhan's whole body tremble. Qingpin was ignorant, so she didn't know. When Guhan and King Yu carried out some kind of indescribable movement. Once King Yu was at a disadvantage and was tortured by Guhan to the point that he wanted to die. King Yu only needed to lick Guhan's ear desperately. King Yu only needed to lick the solid cold's ear with all his might, and the solid cold's durability would instantly drop by around 3 times. In just a short while, that damn thing would be shot out. King Yu had never failed this move. Don't lick my place in the future. Guhan knocked Qingpin's head hard, then pinched Qingpin's cheek and warned Qingpin with a red face. Okay, I hate Guhan the most. Qingpin and Guhan played for a while. Then the first plate of red braised meat was served. Qingpin immediately threw Guhan to the back of his mind and began to gorge himself on his delicacies. Who was Guhan? He couldn't remember. It was around 10 o'clock in the morning, which wasn't mealtime, so the entire Chanel seemed very empty. There were only 2 customers. One was sitting in the west corner eating quietly, and the other was Qingpin, who was wolfing down his food at the table. Guhan casually ate a few mouthfuls of meat and pretended to be bored as he chatted with a waitress standing beside him. It was already quite boring at this time, and Gohan had ordered 100 caddies of pork in one go. It was obvious that he was a rich man. Therefore, this beautiful waitress was happy to chat with Gohan. Soon, Gohan got a lot of information out of her. First of all, this Chanel had a very long history. It was the first branch of the Chanel chain, which was also the second branch. It had a history of more than 280 years and could be considered one of the 3 oldest shops on the entire street. The turnover of staff in this branch was very fast. There were no more than 2 employees who were older than him, and neither of them had stayed here for more than 5 years. Moreover, this branch had just been renovated 3 years ago, and all the decorations in the shop had been changed. Moreover, in order to reinstall the underground pipes, the entire ground had been excavated. When he heard this, Gohan felt that this shop couldn't be the place where the loan receipt was hidden. First, because there wasn't anyone who stayed here for a long time, so there couldn't be someone who received Jitian Jiandi's order and waited for more than 700 years to send that letter to him. Second, since the shop was so thoroughly renovated, it was obvious that the loan receipt couldn't be hidden in the shop. Otherwise, it would have been discovered long ago, and it wouldn't have fallen into Gohan's hands. After understanding this, Gohan decided to wait for Qingpin to finish his 100 caddies of red braised pork before looking at the other 2 roads. The second Jiefeng Road was the Jiefeng Road that appeared first. This Jiefeng Road had always been called Jiefeng Road before Jitian Jiandi ascended to the throne, so it was obviously the second most suspicious. Contrary to the previous Jiefeng Road, number 87 of Jiefeng Road 700 years ago was a shop, but 700 years later, number 87 of Jiefeng Road had become a residential building. Could the loan receipt be hidden in someone's house? Gohan's heart skipped a beat, and he walked around the building. This residential building had some history. Gohan saw a nameplate by the side of the road. This nameplate was marked with the year 2856, which proved that this building was at least built before 2856. The floor of this building was not high, only about 6 floors. This was impossible outside the core area, because the residential buildings outside the core area had at least 100 stories in order to accommodate more people. Only the residential buildings in the core area were generally not tall, and the highest was no more than 10 stories. The reason for this was that these residential buildings were actually the sword bearers and their families. The sword bearers needed a good living environment, and the higher the floor, the worse the living environment would become. In order to let the sword bearers live as comfortably as possible, the sword bearers' residential buildings in the core area of every base would be limited to less than 10 stories. This was both good and bad for Gohan. The good was that there were fewer residents in the building, so it was naturally easier to search. Otherwise, a residential building with more than 100 stories and more than 400 households would be impossible for Gohan to find a complete residential building even if he searched for 10 days and 10 nights. The bad was naturally that the difficulty of communication would greatly increase. When facing ordinary residents, as long as Gohan revealed his identity as a sword bearer, he believed that no one would dare to refuse Gohan's search. However, it was different for the sword bearers, who would be willing to let an outsider search their home. When faced with Gohan's request, these sword bearers would naturally refuse without hesitation. Therefore, if he wanted to find out which household might have the loan slip, Gohan had to use some clever methods, such as the 2 old aunties who were enjoying the shade under a small tree in front of the building. "Hello, big sister. May I ask if Mr. Li Gang's family lives here?" Gohan asked the 2 aunties with a smile. "How can you say that, kid? I'm not a big sister. I'm almost 70 years old." Although the 2 aunties scolded him, they still didn't know how to speak, but their cheerful smiles deeply betrayed them. Obviously, the words big sister were very useful to them. "Young man, who did you say you were looking for? We don't have a neighbor called Li Gang in this building." One of the aunties said with a smile. "Really? I seem to remember that Brother Li said that he lives here. Is it number 87 or number 78? Gohan touched his head honestly and said with a puzzled face, "Of course, there wouldn't be a person named Li Gang here, because this name was just made up by Gohan. Young man, you must have heard the wrong street name. I've lived here all my life, and there's no one named Li Gang on this whole street." One of the aunties patted her drooping chest and said, "Then I'm sorry to bother you sisters." Gohan smiled honestly again and took out 2 small boxes from his dimensional pocket and handed them to the 2 aunties and sisters. "These are the 2 boxes of facial masks I won a few days ago. I don't need them, so I'll give them to you 2 sisters as an apology." "Yo, how can I accept this? It's even the Weilong brand of facial masks. I heard that a box can be sold for thousands of yuan on the market." The 2 aunties said they were sorry, but their hands quickly put away the 2 boxes of facial masks. One of the aunties even looked at the dimensional pocket in Gohan's hand that was shining. But don't get me wrong, these aunties didn't want to steal Gohan's dimensional pocket, but they were interested in Gohan's identity as a sword bearer. "Young man, why are you looking for Li Gang? Why don't you tell us about it?" a middle-aged woman asked curiously. "It's like this. Li Gang is a friend I met a few days ago. He said that he has a sister who is very beautiful and wants to introduce her to me, so I came to look for him." Speaking of this, Gohan's face showed 2 groups of shy blushes, and he looked like a shy and honest young man. I was wondering what it was for. It turned out to be a blind date. The 2 aunties laughed, and one of them took one of Gohan's hands and said with a smile, "Young man, you don't have to see Li Gang. Let me tell you, if there are any outstanding beauties, they would have long been snatched away by others. Why would they introduce you to someone they just met? Young man, listen to me. If you really want to know a girl, Sister Wong will introduce you to her. I, Sister Wong, have lived here since I was born. I know all the girls on this street, and I know each and every one of them. I promise to introduce you to a good girl who is gentle, virtuous, and virtuous." Sister Wong turned into a passionate matchmaker in the blink of an eye. "Tell me, what good girls are there around here?" "Oh yes, my family is a family of sword bearers. My ancestors have produced more than a dozen sword bearers. So there's an ancestral teaching in my family that I have to find a family of sword bearers. Aunties, do you know? Is there a family of sword bearers that has been living here?" Gohan asked with a smile. At first glance, Gohan's request for a blind date sounded a bit unreasonable, full of discrimination and a feeling of matching. But in fact, most of the family of sword bearers had such a request. Although there was no scientific conclusion, according to the observation of sword bearers over the years, the marriage between sword bearers could indeed increase the probability of producing a sword bearer in the future. In order to ensure that their own family could continue to have a sword bearer, the family of sword bearers would all marry other sword bearer families. Once a young man or woman in a family expressed dissatisfaction with this tradition and did not abide by it, it could be interpreted as a love story of Liang Shanbua and Zhu Yingtai in this era. The rules in Yinjing City and Yuzhong City were the same. When someone in the family became a sword bearer, he could bring the whole family to live in the core area. However, if the family didn't have a new sword bearer within 3 generations, then the family would be banished to the second ring. Therefore, if one wanted to live in the core area, they would have to have a new sword bearer every 3 generations. Gohan set up such an identity for himself so that he could find out from the mouths of these aunties which families had been living in this building. These families must be the most likely to have the loan receipt. Chapter 746. With the enthusiastic help of these 2 aunties, Gohan successfully obtained a lot of information. For example, there weren't many swordsman families that had been passed down for more than 10 generations, only 2 at most. One of them was said to have already declined, and once the current family head died, the family would immediately move out of the core area. The other family was bustling, and 2 brothers had become swordsmen at the same time. They were famous in the entire street, and everyone wanted to marry their daughters into them. In summary, the 2 aunties advised Gohan not to marry the daughter of the second family. With the 2 swordsman brothers, he would definitely be able to live a good life. On the surface, Gohan nodded with a smile, but in reality, he excluded the 2 swordsman brothers. This was because the 2 swordsman brothers were extremely greedy and lustful, and it was said that they had already occupied more than 10 beautiful girls, taking all of them as their concubines. However, the 2 swordsman brothers had gone through legal procedures, and the concubines were also willing to be with the 2 brothers, so Gohan couldn't be bothered to care about these things. However, with the two brothers' greedy and lustful personalities, it was impossible for them to protect the treasure that I Ching had left for him. Not to mention the preciousness of the promissory note. Even the jade ring that I Ching had left behind was extremely rare. With such a precious item in the hands of the two brothers, Gohan didn't believe that the two brothers would be able to resist the temptation, and it was even more impossible for them to send him the precious jade ring. Therefore, after bidding farewell to the two unwilling aunties, Gohan directly went to the door of the swordsman family that was said to be moving out of the core area. Knock, knock. Gohan knocked 3 times, but no one answered. However, the door opened directly, and it turned out that the door had not been closed at all. As he walked into the room, a pungent smell assaulted his nostrils. This was a very strange smell like bitter gourd, and there was even a hint of sourness in it. Looking towards the source of the smell, he discovered that there was a small stove burning in the living room, and there was a teapot on top of the stove. However, this utensil was different from the teapot. The body of the teapot was much higher and wider than the teapot. It was a utensil that Gohan had never seen before. Interesting. Gohan quietly walked forward, wanted to take a closer look at the utensil, but he suddenly heard a tender voice behind him. "Don't touch my grandfather's medicine." "Who are you?" Gohan turned his head and saw a 7 or 8-year-old child with pigtails looking at him with a pair of big watery eyes. "You're saying that this pot is boiling medicine?" Gohan sniffed the bitter smell in the air again. "How come I've never heard of such medicine?" "Grandpa said it's called Chinese medicine. It's a treasure that has been passed down from ancient times to the present. You people cut your own bodies every day. Sooner or later, you won't even know how you died." The child unceremoniously ridiculed Gohan, then ran over and pushed Gohan away from the medicine stove. "You baddies, get out of here. My grandfather isn't dead yet, and this is still my home." It turned out that this child had thought of Gohan as a government worker who had chased them out of the core region. It was no wonder that his attitude towards Gohan was so disgusted and unfriendly. However, Gohan had not expected that this unremarkable teapot would actually contain Chinese medicine. This was a treasure that had been lost for 1,000 years. Gohan had long heard of the power of Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine could cure many diseases that even the current medical technology, which was like black technology, could not. It could even bring the dead back to life. It was a legendary and incomparably powerful medical system. Unfortunately, during the apocalypse, most Chinese medicine had died in that catastrophe. The remaining bit of Chinese medicine had also been lost during the cultural apocalypse. Although later generations had the intention to restore Chinese medicine through some clues, unfortunately, they had never been able to find a method. Thus, Chinese medicine had become a mythical existence, only heard of in name, but not in reality. This had become one of the biggest problems since ancient times. A book related to Chinese medicine could easily sell for tens of millions of yuan, which showed how rare and precious Chinese medicine was. Unexpectedly, Gohan could see the legendary Chinese medicine in this small room. This made Gohan even more convinced that the old man in this room was definitely not simple. It was very likely that he was the person he was looking for. "Little boy, you've misunderstood. I'm not here to chase you away. I'm here to look for something," Gohan replied honestly. "Look for something? Don't lie to me just because I'm a child. My house is already bare. How could there be anything for you to look for?" The child shouted, then immediately realized that something was wrong. "What nonsense are you talking about? This is my house. Why are you looking for something in my house?" "Little boy." Gohan suddenly raised his voice, making it loud enough for the people in the room to hear clearly. "I received a letter. It was the owner of the letter who told me that there was something I wanted here." "What are you talking about? Which bastard wrote to you to look for something in our house? We don't have what you want at all. You'd better get out of here now." The child put his hands on Gohan's waist, trying hard to push Gohan away from his house. Unfortunately, Gohan's body technique had already surpassed the level of being one with the horse. This child's strength could not push him away at all. "Little Hai, that's our family's distinguished guest. Cough, cough. Don't be rude. Cough, cough." Hurry up and invite the distinguished guest in. An old voice came from the room and said to Little Hai. The child could only helplessly stick out his tongue, tilted his head, and pointed to the direction of the door to Gahan's room. Since Grandpa called you and said that you're a distinguished guest, then go in. Gahan pushed open the door of Grandpa's room. An even more strange smell rushed into Gahan's nose. Unlike the smell of Chinese medicine that Gahan could not smell before, this smell had been smelled by Gahan many times. This was the smell of death. Once this smell appeared on a person's body, it meant that this person was not far from death. This was not the smell of injury and death, but the smell of a person's lifespan coming to an end. All the vitality in the body had been completely cut off. This old man was already dead. Unlike the four bare walls in the living room, the old man's room was filled with all kinds of things. On the wall was a big picture of the yin-yang fish of Tai Chi, and around the yin-yang fish was placed the 8 trigrams. In the corner of the room, there was a statue of a deity respectfully worshipped. In front of the statue of the deity was an incense burner with 3 sticks of sandalwood. Around the incense burner were all kinds of offerings, and there was even a piece of expensive natural pork. This person's house was bare to this extent, but he still used such rich offerings to worship a statue of the deity. From this, it could be seen how devout this old man's faith was. Gahan carefully looked at the statue of the deity and found it unexpectedly familiar. He seemed to have seen it somewhere before. His gaze moved away from the statue of the deity, and on the other side of the room, there was a huge bookcase. On the bookcase, there were all kinds of books neatly arranged. These books were all in an ancient thread-bound style, a style that only existed in the Middle Ages. Although there were many books like this now, from the model marks on the bookcase, it was very likely that these books were all authentic, left behind from the era before the Great Destruction. This was an incredible amount of wealth. If these books were all authentic, then any one of them could easily be sold for hundreds of thousands or even millions in auction. Gahan couldn't help but walk closer, wanting to see if these books were real or fake. But before Gahan could take a few steps forward, Little Hai blocked in front of Gahan, shaking his head and saying, "I won't let you look at my family's things. You bad person must have been tempted to steal my family's books and sell them. I definitely won't let you touch my family's things." "Little Hai, how dare you?" His grandfather, who was lying on the sickbed, suddenly roared, scaring Little Hai into kneeling on the ground. Little Hai walked to his grandfather's bedside and cried, "Grandpa, please don't be angry. It's all Little Hai's fault. Please don't be angry. Please don't be angry." This is a good child. He knows that every time his grandfather gets angry, he is one step closer to the king of hell. Gahan looked at the child approvingly, then once again approached the bookcase. Gahan found that these books were very well organized. Although there were no titles written on the middle of the books, there was a small slip of paper at the bottom of each book on which was written the name of the book. Gahan glanced at it and saw the labels Tao Te Ching, Nan Hua True Scripture, Profound Penetration True Scripture, Rushing Void True Scripture, Yellow Court Scripture, Jade Emperor Scripture, 9 Cauldrons Divine Pill Scripture, All True Saints Divine Embryo Scripture, Heavenly Pure Golden Liquid Divine Pill Scripture, Yellow Emperor's Inner Scripture, and so on. Are these all authentic? Even with Gahan's temperament, when he saw the names of these books, he was so excited that he couldn't control himself. These books were extremely precious treasures to humans. Since the great cultural collapse, these books could no longer be found. It was impossible for future generations to know even a word in them. It had been 800 years. These books had disappeared for 800 years. If people knew that these Taoist classics still existed in the world in the form of ancient books, perhaps even Jinny couldn't help but take these Taoist classics into his own collection. Gahan roughly glanced at it again and found that there were more than 300 different labels here. If all the Taoist classics marked by these labels were preserved here, then almost 90% of the Taoist classics were here. Humans could almost declare that one of the most mysterious cultures in China since ancient times, Taoism, could be completely resurrected. Such precious things. Why did you hide them here? If you had given them to humans earlier, then we humans would have been able to understand the thoughts of our ancestors and even find a way to eliminate Yuan Ko. Seeing this, Gohan couldn't help but ask the old man lying on the bed with some excitement. The heavenly Tao is heartless, and the people have no self. The calamity of humanity has not ended, and it is not time for these things to come into being. Cough, cough. The old man said with a weak voice, but today my Wudong lineage can finally be free. Chapter 747. This old man actually said that he was a descendant of Wudong. When Gohan heard these words, he instantly thought of the unfinished story of the Wudong Pinnacle Dungeon. The survivors of Wudong Mountain were all rescued by the immortal sword wielder back to Yanjing City. Could it be that this old man was a descendant of those survivors? If that was the case, then these vast and boundless Taoist scriptures could be explained. These books should be treasures brought down from Wudong Mountain by the descendants of Wudong, and had always been in the hands of the descendants of Wudong. Grandpa, what nonsense are you talking about? What relationship do we have with Wudong Mountain? How are we descendants of Wudong? Is your illness worsening again? The little brat said hurriedly, trying to cover up the matter of the descendants of Wudong. Little Hai, there is nothing to hide in front of this Lord. We have to tell the truth to make up for the mistake left by our ancestors. The old man coughed violently a few more times, scaring Little Hai into kneeling beside the old man, repeatedly saying yes. Lord, this old man has waited for more than 60 years, and finally, you have arrived. The sins of our Wu-Tang lineage for generations can finally be put to an end on this day. Although the old man's face was full of illness, he could not suppress the smile on his face. Clearly, the happiness in his heart had surpassed the pain in his body. What is going on? Are you really the descendants of Wudong Mountain? Gohan asked. So you already know about Wudong Mountain? That old man will not hide it from you. This old man is the 39th generation descendant of Wudong Jinwu, the 58th generation leader of Wudong. When the old man spoke of the identity of the current leader of Wudong, his expression became very strange. It was unclear whether it was an expression of happiness or regret. To think that Wudong sect still exists in this world. He nodded. What about the others? I remember that there were hundreds of Wudong sect members who escaped back to Yanjing City. What about the others? Where did their descendants go? Descendants. The old man's expression became even more pained. There are no descendants. The entire Wudong sect is only left with the two of us. Otherwise, the position of Wudong sect leader would not have been handed to an old man like me, who has no talent at all. What is going on? Could it be that the descendants of Wudong encountered many more disasters later on? How could there be only the two of you left? Gohan asked, puzzled. My lord is wise. We have indeed suffered a calamity. However, this tribulation does not come from outsiders, but from our own hearts. After saying this, the old man fell silent for a long time. The stiff aura on his face became even more intense. Gohan estimated that in less than 10 minutes, this old man would pass away. What calamity will come from your heart? Gohan continued to ask. It's greed. The old man stretched out his hand and ordered Little C. Little C, go get Grandpa's brocade box. Grandpa? Which box are you talking about? The child even winked at his grandfather as he spoke, but it did not escape Gohan's eyes. Bastard. Apart from the one and only brocade box that Grandpa has, how could he have a second brocade box? The old man coughed violently a few more times. Stinking brat. If you don't want to anger your grandfather to death, then give me that brocade box. Yes. Only then did the child helplessly get up and walk to the side of the bookshelf. He gently pressed a certain spot, and the entire bookshelf began to move to the sides, revealing a small cabinet in the middle of the bookshelf. From the cabinet, he suddenly took out a brocade box. Grandpa, it's here. Little C placed the brocade box in front of his grandfather. The old man struggled to stretch out his bony, withered hand from under the blanket and slowly opened the brocade box. From inside, he took out a pure white letter and handed it to Gohan. Gohan took the letter and saw that at the center of the top of the letter were the words, I owe you. I owe you. Today, I borrowed 3 revolutions immortal pills from the Wudong sect. In the future, I will definitely repay you tenfold. Whether it is 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years. If there is a descendant who holds a IOU and asks for repayment from me or my descendants must do their best to repay it. Not a single word of refusal is allowed. Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon, April 15th, 2286. After reading the words on the IOU, Guhan's heart was filled with excitement. Although there were less than 100 words on the IOU, it revealed a lot of shocking information. First, the IOU was written by Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon. Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon was the 7th head of the Lun Yin family, and also the first female head of the Lun Yin family. Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon's talent was extremely high. Before the age of 35, she had already become a peak immortal sword wielder. She was only one step away from becoming an emperor sword wielder. It was said that at the time, all the sword wielder naturally believed that Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon would ascend to the throne and become an emperor. However, until the day she died, she was still a mortal sword wielder. Later on, it was said that Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon's talent was sufficient, and she even had a sword spirit connection with the Emperor's Sword of Ether. Being able to form a sword spirit connection with the Emperor's Sword meant that she had a 100% chance of successfully synchronizing with the Emperor's Sword of Ether. However, in the end, she had never touched the Emperor's Sword of Ether until the drunken monk Jindi succeeded in synchronizing with the Emperor's Sword of Ether. Since then, Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon's hopes of becoming Jindi had completely disappeared. Although there were no written records of this, almost all of the later generations could say with certainty that Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon had a crush on the drunken monk Jindi her entire life. In order for the drunken monk Jindi to ascend to the throne, Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon had even given up on her own hope of becoming emperor and voluntarily gave the Emperor's Sword of Ether to the drunken monk Jindi. Unfortunately, Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon's infatuation did not come to fruition. In the end, the drunken monk Jindi did not end up with Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon. Instead, he became a monk and became a bald monk. He was the only Jindi among all the Jindi to become a monk. After that, Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon locked herself up in the Fleeting family and never came out again. Later on, she married some man and had children with him. Perhaps she didn't marry at all and only had children. 2 years after she gave birth to the heir of the Fleeting family, Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon passed away. 2 years later, the drunken monk Jindi ascended as well. No one in the later generations knew what had happened between them. Even if they knew, they did not dare to say it out loud. No one dared to cause trouble for the Fleeting family. It was such a good love story that no one dared to write a book or a script about it. It was a waste of a top-tier IP. From the contents of the note, Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon had borrowed 3 revolutions elixirs from the descendants of the Wudong clan and promised that her descendants would pay back 10 times the amount. As long as the descendants of the Wudong clan came to her with this note, her descendants would have to pay back the debt immediately. They could not afford to waste even a single second. Here was the question: how many 6 revolutions elixirs did the descendants of the Wudong clan have? I Ching had obtained 1 from the descendants of the Wudong clan and left it to Gahan. Fleeting Year of Bloody Moon had borrowed 3 more from the descendants of the Wudong clan. Who knew how many 6 revolutions elixirs the descendants of the Wudong clan had left? However, on second thought, since I Ching could take away a 6 revolutions elixir from the descendants of the Wudong clan, it was clear that I Ching had a very good relationship with the descendants of the Wudong clan. It was not strange that I Ching would entrust his affairs to the descendants of the Wudong clan. Right now, Gahan was not interested in the 6 revolutions elixir. What he really cared about was the problem of the note. With the value of 3 6 revolutions elixirs and the promise of paying back 10 times the amount, let alone 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood, the Fleeting family would have made a profit even if they asked for 30,000 cubic centimeters. Moreover, Gahan believed that with the foundation of the Fleeting family, 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood should not be a problem. The fleeting family had given birth to a total of 4 Giendi, and every generation of Giendi had a good relationship with the fleeting family. If the fleeting family left a few thousand cc of sovereign blood for each of their own Giendi, and then each of the other Giendi gave 500 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood to the fleeting family, it would not be a problem for the fleeting family to accumulate tens of thousands of cc of sovereign blood. Therefore, Gohan no longer had any doubts that this note would be able to obtain 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood. However, at the same time, new doubts surfaced in Gohan's mind. The borrower of this note was clearly from the Wudong clan. It belonged to the Wudong clan. Originally, Gohan had thought that the promissory note had been loaned out by the heaven-shrouding Sword Emperor and that the Wu-Tang lineage was only temporarily keeping it for the Sword Emperor. He had never expected that the promissory note actually belonged to the Wu-Tang lineage. What right did the Wu-Tang lineage have to give such a precious promissory note to Gohan? If Gohan was the successor of the Wudong clan, he definitely would not care about the teachings of his ancestors and directly give this note to the fleeting family in exchange for enough resources for his growth. Only an idiot would give it to someone unrelated. For example, the child who is glaring at Gohan right now. If it was not for his grandfather stopping him, this child would have snatched the note back from Gohan's hands. Why? This IOU clearly belongs to you, doesn't it? Why are you willing to give it to me? Gohan asked the old man. He felt that if he did not ask this now, he would never have the time to ask this question again. Sir, you're wrong. This is no longer something that belongs to the Wudong clan. This belongs to you in the first place. The old man coughed up a mouthful of blood. Back then, the Wudong clan committed a sin that cannot be redeemed even with 10,000 deaths. I only hope that this note can allow the Wudong clan to redeem a tenth of our sins. It will be worth it. What sins did you commit? Such a precious note can only redeem a tenth of our sins. Gohan was very curious as to what crime the Wu-Tang lineage had committed in the past to actually cause them to be in such a miserable state. Back then. The old man mumbled for a long time, but he could not catch his breath. In the end, his body went limp, and he fell back onto the bed dead. Grandfather! Little C let out a sorrowful cry and threw herself onto her grandfather's body, letting out a series of tragic cries. Chapter 748. In the end, Gohan still did not know what sin the old man was talking about. But there was no doubt that the Wu-Tang lineage had reached its final, desperate state. This stubborn little boy, named Xiao Hai, had become the last successor of the Wu-Tang lineage. Do you really not need my help? Gohan stood at the door of Little Hai's room, looking at the little boy who was immersed in sorrow, but was filled with determination. For the first time, she asked a question, wanting to take the initiative to help this child. Gohan saw himself in the child. 12 years ago, he had also stood up strong after losing his parents and sister. That was how he got to where he was today. Gohan seemed to see the shadow of himself from 12 years ago in the child. No need. My Wu-Tang lineage relies on ourselves in everything we do. We definitely do not need the help of hypocrites like you. For some reason, the child was always filled with hostility towards Gohan, as if Gohan was the murderer who had destroyed his family. Then what do you plan to do with these things? Gohan looked at the various treasures in the room and could not help but ask worriedly. Xiao Hai was only a child of 7 or 8 years old. Whether or not he could support himself was already a problem, let alone protect these precious scriptures. Gohan was worried that not only would these scriptures not become Xiao Hai's wealth, but they would also become a source of danger for him. If someone found out that he had so many treasures hidden in his house, he might not be able to keep his life. What? Is it not enough to take my family's promissory note? You want to take away our scriptures? Xiao Hai sneered. I am the Wu-Tang sect leader now. If you want our Wu-Tang sect scriptures, then kill me. As long as you kill me, all these things will be yours. Forget it. You're on your own. If you have any problems, you can come to me. If I can help you, I will definitely help you. In the face of such a stubborn child, Gohan didn't want to interfere. He casually wrote a note with his contact number on it and placed it on the table. Then he greedily left Little Hi's house with a note. As Little C watched Gahan leave, the stubborn Little C seemed to suddenly lose the strength to support herself. She slumped to the ground, holding her head and crying for a long time before standing up again. He walked to the side of the table and picked up the note that Gahan had left behind. He roughly glanced at the contact number on the note and tore it into pieces. That night, everyone on the street knew that the last elder of the last swordsman family had passed away. Their grandson went to the council the next day and moved to a new house in the second ring. Then, he quickly left the street and the core area. No one knew where he had moved to. Unexpectedly, after 3 days, Gahan had no choice but to return to the Flowing Year Mountains entrance. Even the 2 guards at the entrance were a little surprised to see him. They didn't know why he came back. However, this time, Gahan didn't enjoy the sumptuous reception like the last time. He registered at the entrance, and the guard reported to the higher-ups. Soon, news came that Gahan was allowed to go up the mountain. However, the person who received Gahan in this life was not fleeting wooden fish, but a man who looked a little dispirited. Although he was dressed very well, Gahan could feel a sense of dispiritedness from his body. Gahan couldn't feel any liveliness that a normal person should have. If not for the fact that Gahan had seen him in photos countless times, Gahan would never believe that the man in front of him was the current head of the Flowing Year family, Liu Yanling's biological father. According to Liu Yanling, her father was still fighting in Moscow when Gahan arrived 3 days ago. Who would have thought that he would be able to return to Yanjing City in just 3 days? Only Jinny was capable of such speed. "Why are you looking for us?" Fleeting Wooden Fish asked weakly. "Didn't you reject my father's offer? Why are you looking for us?" For some reason, Gahan could sense a hint of happiness in Fleeting Time's expression when he spoke, as if he had benefited from his rejection of Fleeting Time's wooden fish. "It's like this. I was lucky this morning, and I found this IOU. I wonder if the Flowing Year family will accept it." Gahan placed the IOU in front of Fleeting Wooden Fish. "What a joke. We've always been the ones borrowing from others. Why would the Flowing Year family borrow from others?" Fleeting Wooden Fish finally showed a hint of liveliness when he heard Gahan's words. His liveliness was quickly replaced by shock. "Where did you get this IOU from?" Fleeting Wooden Fish asked excitedly. "A poor child gave it to me. It seems that the Flowing Year family knows about this IOU." A smile appeared on Gahan's face. He could tell from Fleeting Time's excited expression that the IOU was genuine. "So the Wu-Tang clan is still alive. Tell me, where are the members of the Wu-Tang clan? I want you to tell me right now." Fleeting Wooden Fish was agitated. It was as if he was desperate to find the successor of the Wu-Tang clan. "I don't know, and even if I did, I wouldn't tell you," Gahan replied coldly. Although no one had spoken ill of the Flowing Year family for the past 1,000 years, and no one had ever heard of their misdeeds, only the heavens knew what was going on. Even someone like Wang Jingwei, who had died a horrible death, had been turned into a good person by someone, let alone the Lun Yin family, who was still the leader of the entire world and vaguely controlled the highest authority of the human race. Fleeting Time was stunned for a moment before he finally calmed down and sat down in front of Gahan with a straight face. "Aren't you afraid that I'll take this IOU from you?" Fleeting Wooden Fish suddenly asked. "This is the Flowing Year family. With a single thought, this IOU will never exist. No one will know that you've been to the Flowing Year family and went missing." "I know." Gahan nodded with a smile. "That's why I bet. I bet that the Flowing Year family is the pillar of humanity, the future of humanity, and the conscience of humanity. Since the Flowing Year family is the conscience of humanity, they will not take this IOU from me." "You have a glib tongue. I really don't know why Ling would fall for someone like you." The way Fleeting Time looked at Gahan was like how a mother-in-law would look at her son-in-law. "Wait a minute, that doesn't sound right." "Forget it. I'll let the mother-in-law look at her son-in-law then. It's a pretty good description." "Oomph. Since you're giving me this IOU, you must want something from me. Tell me, what do you want from the Flowing Year family?" Fleeting Wooden Fish did not wait for Gahan to speak. "I remember now. My dad told me that you want to sever your hair, right?" "Very well. I'll take charge of this matter. I'll give you the sever black hair. Take it and leave quickly. If you're too late, you won't be able to take it when my dad returns." With that, Fleeting Wooden Fish took out the Green Slayer from his dimensional pocket. It appeared that he had been keeping the Green Slayer in his dimensional pocket all this time, as if he was prepared to give it to Gahan. However, it seemed like Fleeting Wooden Fish was not at home at the moment. It was precisely because Fleeting Wooden Fish was not at home that Fleeting Wooden Fish was able to make the decision. If not, Gahan would still have to deal with the cunning Fleeting Wooden Fish. "Master, you're wrong. Sever my hair was very important to me 3 days ago, but it no longer holds any meaning to me after 3 days. I no longer need it," said Gahan. The reason why Gahan needed the Green Slayer so badly was because he wanted to use it to sever the Juzi sword so that he could synchronize with the king of Yu's Gojin sword. However, according to the current plan, the king of Yu would be reborn into the body of an ancient sword maiden. When that time came, Gahan would no longer need to sever the Juzi sword, but the ancient sword Qingpin sword. What kind of joke was this? The Juzi sword gritted its teeth and gave up. There was not much emotion in it anyway. However, how could Gahan give up on the Qingpin sword? To be honest, if Gahan had to choose between the Qingpin sword and the King of Yu's sword, the Qingpin sword would have a higher chance of winning. Fortunately, Gahan did not need to sever the sword mark between himself and the Qingpin sword. This was because the ancient sword maiden that was born after the King of Yu's rebirth was a sword maiden without the original wielder. At the same time, the King of Yu's soul was connected to Gahan's soul. Therefore, Gahan could use the sword maiden grafting technique to make the reborn King of Yu his own sword maiden. When that time came, Gahan would only need to use the yin-yang swordplay technique again to make the reborn King of Yu and Qingpin happy together, just like the relationship between Etian and Douyu. Therefore, even if the green sever sword was given to Gahan for free, Gahan would not even spare a glance. No matter which sword maiden it was, Gahan could not bear to kill her. The green sever sword was no longer attractive to Gahan. "You don't want it anymore?" Fleeting Time looked at Gahan suspiciously, then pushed the green sever sword to the side and said after a moment of silence, "You brat, don't tell me you're still thinking about my Ling. Let me tell you, even if my dad doesn't reject you, I won't allow you to be with Ling. Ling is not good enough for you. Just give up." What did Fleeting Time mean? What did he mean by Gahan is thinking about Ling? What did he mean by Ling is not good enough for Gahan, who is the daughter of the #1 aristocratic family? Chapter 749. Don't worry, Master Lunyan. I have no ulterior motives towards Miss Ling. I'm here with this promissory note in hopes of obtaining the Emperor's blood. Guhan decided not to waste any more time with Fleeting Time, so he revealed his true purpose of coming here. Emperor's blood? What do you want that for? Are you planning to go somewhere dangerous? Fleeting Time let out a sigh of relief when he heard that Guhan was not here for his daughter. "You brat, you have no conscience at all. You're not here for Rinrin. You're not here for Rinrin." There was a hint of disappointment in Fleeting Time's voice. Why did it feel like Fleeting Time was hoping that Gahan would take Liunian Ling away? "How many drops of Emperor's blood do you want? Will 1,000 drops be enough? It's enough for you to die 1,000 times over." Fleeting Time said generously, as if giving Gahan 1,000 drops of Emperor's blood was a generous thing to do. "It's not enough. It's not enough. Master Lunyan, please speak with your conscience. Is 1,000 drops of Emperor's blood worth the powder of a 6 revolutions pill?" Gahan retorted. A cubic meter of Emperor's blood could be divided into 20 drops. 1,000 drops of Emperor's blood was only equivalent to 50 cubic meters. It was a drop in the ocean for Gahan. About that, Fleeting Time was clearly not a liar. He knew better than anyone else the miraculous effects of a 6 revolutions immortal pill. It was too stingy to trade 1,000 drops of Monarch's blood for a single 6 revolutions immortal pill. "I'll make it 500 cubic centimeters then," Fleeting Time said through gritted teeth. He was afraid that Gahan did not understand the exact content of 500 cubic centimeters. So he added, "A cubic meter is equivalent to 20 drops of Emperor's blood. My 500 cubic centimeters is equivalent to 10,000 drops of Emperor's blood. I'll give you 10 times that amount." 10 times is not enough. Gohan frowned. "Master Lun Yin, I can't be bothered to beat around the bush. I want 20 times the amount." 20 times. Let me think about it. No problem. 1,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood, it's decided. Fleeting Time answered without hesitation. "Sigh, Comrade Gohan, you have no idea how important this 1,000 cubic centimeters is to the Fleeting Time clan. It's equivalent to half of our clan's inventory. It'll take us 500 years to replenish it." Fleeting Time actually began to complain to Gohan about how poor he was. "Patriarch Lun Yin, I don't think you understand what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that I'm going to increase it by 20 times. In other words, I'm going to increase it by 20 times from 500 cubic centimeters, not 50 cubic centimeters." Gohan did not give Fleeting Time the chance to continue his act. He immediately told Fleeting Time the amount he needed. "On the base of 500 cubic centimeters, increase it by 20 times, 10,000 cubic centimeters." Even with the wealth of the Fleeting Time clan could not afford the amount that Gohan was asking for. That's impossible. "You're asking for too much. Do you think the Fleeting Time clan is a tycoon? We won't be able to withdraw such a huge amount, even if we empty out our entire storage. Young man, don't be too greedy. Do you really think the Fleeting Time clan is rich?" Fleeting Time clan said angrily. "Patriarch, Gohan, never ask for more than a cent from others. What's mine is mine. Are you telling me that 3 6 revolutions pills are not worth 10,000 cubic centimeters of Imperial blood?" Gohan retorted. "A 6 revolutions pill is a super treasure that can turn an ordinary person into an immortal sword wielder. Even so, it's still not worth it. That's 10,000 cubic centimeters of Imperial blood. How can 3 6 revolutions pills compare to that?" Fleeting Time clan snorted. "I admit that the 6 revolutions pill is miraculous and can create an immortal sword wielder. However, the sword bearer must be a disciple of the Ren school, or else this 6-cycle celestial pill will turn from a divine medicine to a poison. To most people, this 6-cycle celestial pill is even worse than trash. You want to use something like this to exchange for our Lun Yin family's 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood? All right. Since Patriarch Lun Yin said that 3 6 revolutions immortal pills are not worth 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood, may I ask how much sovereign blood a single 6 revolutions immortal pill is worth? Please give me a clear price, Patriarch Lun Yin. Then I'll give you a price. 300 years ago, a 6 revolutions pill was auctioned off at the Soaring Dragon auction. In the end, it was exchanged for a Duke Dimensional Crystal. If you hand over a Duke-type Dimensional Crystal to the Sword Committee Association, you will receive 40 million hero coins, and the exchange price for 1 cubic centimeter of sovereign blood is 100,000 hero coins. Therefore, a 6 revolutions pill is worth 400 cubic centimeters of Imperial blood. Since the Blood Moon Patriarch owes you 3 6 revolutions pills, I'll give you 1,200 cubic centimeters of Imperial blood." After a long discussion, Fleeting Time finally calculated the price of the 6 revolutions immortal pill for the sovereign blood. At first glance, it sounded like a very fair calculation. It was still the price from the auction. When it came to auctions, people would naturally think that it was a way to maximize the value of an item. The best way to reflect the value of an item was through auctions. Therefore, the price was very fair. But in reality, Fleeting Time had secretly hidden an inconspicuous trap in his words. That was, a Duke Dimensional Crystal was worth 40 million hero coins. It was true that a Duke Dimensional Crystal was worth 40 million hero coins. However, this 40 million hero coins was the purchasing price of the Sword Committee, not the exchange price. Apart from ordinary people with no ability, anyone who would sell it to the Sword Committee at such a price would be a complete idiot. What a joke. A Duke Dimensional Crystal was already worth 90 million hero coins in the black market. who would sell it to the Sword Committee for 40 million hero coins. However, the Sword Committee was selling it for 100,000 hero coins. The Sword Committee had placed it in the mission exchange, and it could be bought with 100,000 hero coins. There had never been a shortage of it. However, this was only a loophole in the price. More importantly, the price of this 6 Revolutions immortal pill was 300 years ago. Today, 300 years later, there was still an endless supply of sovereign bloodlines. Even though the production of Commandery King seeds was much less than 300 years ago, 6 Revolution Celestial pills had completely disappeared. Even if you had money, you would not be able to buy one. Gohan believed that if he were to auction a 6 Revolutions pill at the Dragon Ascension auction now, the price would at least double. Although Gohan knew that Lunyan's calculation method had given him a huge advantage, he did not want to continue arguing with him. Because in the absence of an absolutely fair reference, arguing over the price of an item would never yield a conclusion. All right, family head Lunyan, you have a point. I, Gohan, am convinced. We'll go according to the price you mentioned. A 6 Revolutions pill is equivalent to 400 cubic centimeters of Imperial blood, and these 3 6 Revolutions pills are equivalent to 1,200 cubic centimeters of Imperial blood. Gohan said with a pained expression, "At least you know your stuff. I've already calculated it for you." Lunyan nodded in satisfaction. "Then I'll confirm with family head one last time. A 6 Revolutions pill is equivalent to 400 cubic centimeters of Imperial blood, right?" Gohan suddenly asked again in a serious tone. "That's right. That's the price." Lunyan nodded solemnly. "You're not going to change it? Fair trade? Heaven and earth as witness? Sun and moon as witness? Swear on the honor of the Lunyan clan? A 6 Revolutions pill is equivalent to 400 cubic centimeters of Imperial blood? Is there something wrong with you? Do you have to repeat it so many times?" Lunyan glared at Gohan in dissatisfaction. "My Lunyan clan has always been a man of his word. I've said that this is the price, and this is the price. Heaven and earth as witness, sun and moon as witness. I swear on the honor of the Lunyan clan that this is the price. Since that's the case, I have nothing else to say. The Lunyan clan is truly the fairest clan in the world. Gohan, am utterly impressed." Gohan finally said sincerely. Fleeting Zheng heaved a sigh of relief when the price was finally set. "Since the price has been set, this IOU is useless to me. Shall I tear it up now?" he said as he picked up the promissory note. "Go ahead." Gohan waved his hand. "This receipt has already been returned to the Lunyan clan. It's yours now." Good, good, good," Fleeting Time said, and with a wave of his sword, Aura, the IOU slip was reduced to dust. Unless time was reversed, no one would be able to repair the IOU slip. "Comrade Gohan, please wait here for a moment. I'll go get you 1,200 cubic centimeters of Imperial blood right now." Lunyan was about to get up to retrieve the Imperial blood for Gohan. "Wait," Gohan suddenly spoke up. "You're wrong. It's not 1,200 cubic centimeters. It's 12,000 cubic centimeters of Imperial blood." Lunyan Zhang's face immediately turned the color of a pig's liver. He glared at Gohan viciously. "Lad, although our Lunyan clan values justice, fairness, and benevolence, we do not dare to offend you. However, we will not allow anyone to toy with us. You can either scram after you get the 1,200 cubic centimeters of Imperial blood, or scram right now." "What's the meaning of this? Is the Lunyan clan going to go back on their word? Are you going to disregard the price we agreed on?" Gohan retorted. "We've agreed on a price of 400 cubic centimeters, not 4,000 cubic centimeters. Are you going to deny it?" Fleeting Time continued to rage. "That's right. I admit that it's 400 cubic centimeters. Heaven and earth are my witnesses, and the sun and moon are my witnesses." Gohan repeated mischievously, leaving Fleeting Time confused. What's she trying to say? What's he trying to do? "My apologies, Lord Lunyan. I took the wrong IOU just now. That was an IOU that I made after I modified it with the quantum scanner. The real IOU is here." Gohan suddenly produced another receipt and placed it in front of Fleeting Time. It was only then that Fleeting Time noticed that the new IOU was different from the previous one. It had the words 10 times written on it. Chapter 750. It was a trick that Gahan had used to lure his enemies into his trap. In the future, 1,000 years from now, humans would be able to use quantum technology to create many unimaginable black technologies, such as quantum copying. Quantum copying was basically the process of making a complete copy of an item through quantum mimicry. Not only would the copied item be identical in every detail, it would even be able to replicate the age of the paper. If one were to take a piece of paper from 1,000 years ago and make a quantum copy of the paper, they would discover that the paper was also from 1,000 years ago. That was why Fleeting Time knew that it was Gahan's fault when he saw the paper. He took a quick look at the age of the paper, and after confirming that it was indeed from 700 years ago, he no longer doubted the authenticity of the IOU. Fleeting Time knew that his ancestor had left such an IOU for him, and it was clearly recorded in the family history of Fleeting Time's family. However, Fleeting Time's blood moon was careless when he wrote the family history and did not complete the contents of the IOU. The IOU only stated that Fleeting Time had borrowed 3-6 Revolutions elixirs from the Wu-Tang Clan, and that if anyone were to approach Fleeting Time's family with this IOU, they would have to repay the IOU according to its contents without delay. The matter was kept a secret, and Fleeting Time believed that no one other than the Wu-Tang Clan would know about it. Naturally, it was impossible for the Wu-Tang Clan to forge the IOU. Besides, Fleeting Time's handwriting was extremely rare and not something that could be easily replicated. Most importantly, Fleeting Time did not expect Gahan to deceive the Fleeting Time's family with a fake IOU. It had been centuries since anyone dared to deceive the Fleeting Time's family with a fake IOU, unless that person was tired of living. In fact, it was also very easy to distinguish the authenticity of things that were quantum copied. This was because there was a fatal flaw in the vicinity of quantum. That was, the copied thing only needed to be scanned by an electronic scanner to discover the quantum residue on the surface. How could one determine that it was a quantum copy? Once bitten, twice shy, Fleeting Time immediately brought Gahan to the appraisal room of the Fleeting Time family residence when Gahan took out the real IOU. He scanned the IOU with a quantum scanner a dozen times, and only after confirming that there was not a single quantum on the IOU was he able to verify the authenticity of the IOU. There was no doubt that the IOU was the real deal. It was also at this moment that Fleeting Time finally understood Gahan's scheme. The treacherous Gahan had first presented a fake IOU to Fleeting Time. Fleeting Time had repeatedly confirmed the price of the 6 Revolutions pill with Gahan, leading Fleeting Time to believe that Fleeting Time would only need to pay 1,200 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood. If Fleeting Time had known that the IOU would have to pay 10 times the price, he would never have agreed to the price of a 6 Revolutions pill that was equivalent to 400 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood. Now that the price had been confirmed, the Fleeting Time clan had to repay Gahan 12,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood to Fleeting Time. Fleeting Time was in so much pain that he wanted to knock himself out so that he could extricate himself from the awkward situation. That was 12,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood. Even Fleeting Time himself was not sure if the Fleeting Time clan had that much Sovereign's blood in their vault. No, you've lied to me about the price. I refuse to accept it. We must discuss the price again. Fleeting Time immediately changed his stance. Master Fleeting Time, I admit that I was wrong to lie to you with a fake IOU. However, I did not lie to you about the price. You were the one who calculated the price from the beginning. You compared the price of the Soaring Dragon auction, the Dungeon King's blood, and the hero's coins of the Sword Committee. I did not say a single word. How can you say that I lied to you about the price? Gahan retorted. Fleeting Time wanted to slap himself when he heard Gahan's words. Why did I lie to you about the price of the 6 Revolutions pill? Now that I'm the one who set the price, there's nothing I can say to refute it. However, is he really going to pay Gahan 12,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood, just like that? There was no way Fleeting Time clan would agree to that. He was even more unwilling to be a fool after he was deceived by the fake IOU. Fleeting Time Clan and Gohan were in a stalemate. One side insisted that the price was not valid and demanded a recalculation. The other side repeated that the price was set by Fleeting Time Clan himself. It was the most reasonable price, and there was no room for recalculation. The two of them quarreled for almost an hour. In order not to waste everyone's time, the dialogue of the quarrel was not written. Anyway, until the two of them were exhausted, the two sides still did not reach a compromise. What are you arguing about? What a scandal. Fleeting Wooden Fish, who had not been seen for a long time, walked into the room. Fleeting Time immediately stood up from his seat and gave way to Fleeting Time Wooden Fish to take his seat. Fleeting Time Clan then whispered into Fleeting Time Wooden Fish's ear and recounted the entire process. What? 12,000 cc? Even a sly old fox like Fleeting Time Wooden Fish was shocked when he heard that there was 12,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood. Kid, where did you get the courage to ask for so much Sovereign's blood from the Fleeting Time Clan? Fleeting Time Wooden Fish asked in an unfriendly tone. I don't need any courage. I only believe in one thing. Gohan replied calmly. Oh, what do you believe in? Fleeting Time Wooden Fish retorted. If you return what you borrowed, it won't be difficult to borrow again. Gohan enunciated each and every word clearly. It's not difficult to borrow again if you return what you borrowed. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish repeated the words 3 times. The dissatisfaction on his face gradually disappeared, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Good. Well said. That was indeed the case. It's not difficult to borrow again if you return what you borrowed. Little Zheng, go to the treasury and retrieve 12,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood and hand it over to Brother Gohan. Unexpectedly, the arrival of Fleeting Time Wooden Fish had brought about a breakthrough. Once this old man opened his mouth, he would just go straight to the point. The 12,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood was given to Fleeting Time Wooden Fish. Yes, father. It was obvious that Fleeting Time was very obedient to his father. He immediately went to the family's treasury and returned with a briefcase in hand to Gohan. Gohan opened the suitcase and found that it was filled with liquid nitrogen. There were transparent test tubes in the liquid nitrogen, and every single one of them contained golden blood. Gohan took out one of the test tubes and took a sniff to confirm that it was indeed Sovereign's blood. Thank you, Fleeting Time Clan, for your generosity. Gohan placed the suitcase to the side and bowed deeply to the displeased Fleeting Time Wooden Fish and Fleeting Time Wooden Fish. I know that I've been too rash this time. It's a little too much to ask for 12,000 cubic centimeters of Sovereign's blood with a loan slip. However, I can't do anything about it. I have things that I must do. This lowly one will never forget the Fleeting Time Clan's great kindness. If the Fleeting Time Clan has any requests in the future, this lowly one will do his best to repay the favor. This time, Gohan was speaking the truth. He had indeed taken advantage of the Fleeting Time Clan. Aside from the Fleeting Time Clan, there was probably no other clan in the world that would be willing to be taken advantage of by Gohan. Take the Emperor Sword families in Yuzhong City, for example. Not to mention 1,200 cubic centimeters, they would probably think of a way to make Gohan disappear from this world without anyone knowing the moment Gohan took out the loan receipt. There's no need to be so polite. Feel free to look for us if you have any difficulties in the future. The Fleeting Time Clan will be more than happy to help. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish laughed and asked, when do you plan to activate the furnace of heaven and earth? Gohan was stunned. Senior Fleeting Time, how did you know that I'm going to activate the furnace of heaven and earth? Is it that hard to guess? For you to take away so much sovereign bloodline at once without caring about your face, you must be planning something big. In this world, the only thing that you can do that requires so much sovereign blood is probably the worldly furnace. I can even guess why you're activating the furnace of heaven and earth. Since you don't care about severed green hair anymore, it means that you don't want to cut off your sword mark anymore. Could it be that you want to forge a new sword, Maiden? Fleeting Time Wooden Fish suddenly asked. Forge a new sword, Maiden? A huge question mark flashed across Gohan's mind. From fleeting time, wooden fish's words. Could this furnace of heaven and earth have the ability to forge a new sword, Maiden? This was something that Gahan had never heard of before. Gahan had to get to the bottom of this. Senior fleeting time. What do you mean by forging a new sword, Maiden? Gahan asked urgently. You don't know? Fleeting time wooden fish looked very surprised. Didn't you want my 12,000 cubic centimeters sovereign blood to forge a new sword, Maiden? Only a new sword, Maiden, requires more than 10,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood to activate the furnace of heaven and earth. If it's just a simple repair, 4,000 cubic centimeters sovereign blood is enough. Gahan fell silent. He was afraid that fleeting time wooden fish would ask for the extra 8,000 cubic centimeters if he told him that it was for repair. Fortunately, fleeting time wooden fish did not bring up the topic again. Instead, he changed the topic to something else. Gahan, do you know the other important reason why this old man agreed to your request so readily? This lowly one does not know. Gahan replied honestly. Because even if you didn't activate the furnace of heaven and earth, I would have done so sooner or later. Fleeting time wooden fish let out a long sigh. If I don't activate the furnace of heaven and earth soon, I'm afraid that Lena will not be able to live. Chapter 751. After a round of verbal sparring, Gahan finally left the Lunyan family with the 12,000 cubic centimeters of Emperor's blood. But when Gahan left, he left with a tail behind him, a silent and gloomy Reina Takasaka. As a condition for Gahan to take away the 12,000 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood, Gahan had to bring Reina Takasaka with him. According to fleeting wooden fish's words, Reina Kosaka had to make a trip to the furnace of heaven and earth, or she would die for sure. Fleeting time wooden fish did not explain the reason behind it, but Gahan could see that fleeting time's expression was as if his mother had just died. So be it. Gahan did not want to interfere with the Lunyan family's matters. After all, he was only bringing Reina Kosaka to the furnace of heaven and earth. It would not affect Gahan in any way, so there was no need to go against the Lunyan family's wishes. Unlike the last time when Gahan took a car to Yinjing City, the Lunyan family agreed to use their quantum teleportation circle to teleport Gahan. In the blink of an eye, Gahan and Reina Kosaka were back in Yinjing City. Knock, knock. Song Yifei thought that it was Gahan's return when she heard the knocking on the door. She opened the door in surprise. It was Gahan. Unfortunately, Song Yifei's smile did not last for more than a few minutes. She saw a girl following behind Gahan. Who is this woman? Song Yifei took a good look at Reina Takasaka and realized that she was a woman that he had never seen before. She could not help but sigh bitterly in her heart. What did I do in my previous life? Why did I fall in love with a man like Gahan? In the blink of an eye, there's another woman in his harem. Why is my life so bitter? Yifei, don't get the wrong idea. I can't tell you the specifics, but I can assure you that I don't have that kind of relationship with this woman. Gahan seemed to have sensed Song Yifei's thoughts, so he added dryly, Is Gahan trying to explain himself to me? He was worried about my thoughts and was afraid that I would be jealous, so he explained it to me, right? That must be it. Women must be good at comforting themselves, just like Song Yifei. Just one explanation from Gahan was enough for her to imagine a lot of things, and she instantly became much happier. Gahan, wait a little longer. I'll be ready for dinner soon. You and Miss Lena can have a taste of my cooking. Every time Gahan appeared in front of her, Song Yifei couldn't help promoting her cooking skills, as if it was the only thing she could show to Gahan. Although, in fact, cooking was the only thing she could show to Gahan. That's not it. I won't be able to eat your cooking this time. Gahan began to quickly pack up his personal belongings in the room. I have a very urgent matter now. I have to go out immediately. I see. Song Yifei's face was a little gloomy, but she immediately forced a smile and said, It doesn't matter. I'll heat it up for you. You can eat it later. No. I'm afraid I can't come back tonight. In fact, I don't know when I can come back. I'll try to come back before the Octagon Assembly. You can spend the next few days with Lu Shihua. You two can also be companions. Guhan's flat answer made Song Yifei's mood fall to the bottom. She could only hear the sound of string in her brain breaking. Get out. Get out of my sight right now. Song Yifei suddenly rushed to Guhan's side and kicked Guhan's, but trying to kick Guhan out. However, how could Song Yifei compare with Guhan's reaction speed? Just as Song Yifei lifted her leg, Guhan's hand reached behind him and directly grabbed Song Yifei's ankle. Then he forcefully pulled her whole body into his embrace. Wait for me. When I come back, I'll have a good meal with you. After saying this in a very domineering manner, Guhan gently placed Song Yifei on the sofa and then left Song Yifei's house with his Jianyo and Rina Kosaka. Bastard, who wants to eat with you? If you dare, don't ever come back to see me again. Guhan could hear Song Yifei's whining behind him, but he did not look back because turning back would not change anything. What a sinful man. When Guhan completely left Song Yifei's temporary residence, Rina Kosaka, who had been following behind Guhan without saying a word, suddenly said this sarcastically. All of us are sinful. Otherwise, why are we still living in this world? Guhan replied coldly and did not say another word. Rina Kosaka seemed to be too lazy to talk to Guhan anymore. The two of them walked forward in silence and then got on the bus. After a while, Rina Kosaka found herself following Guhan to the front of a 4S shop. The 4S shop clerk, who was humming a tune, noticed someone entering the shop through the reflection on the ground. He immediately raised his head with a professional smile. Before he could say the word welcome, he was stunned. You? It's you. The 4S shop clerk was shocked to find that the person in front of him was none other than the super rich man who bought a Yanhuang 3008 from him a few days ago. However, this rich man's behavior was a little too overbearing. He did not even complete the basic procedures and directly drove away. If he had not paid the money in advance, this unlucky clerk would definitely be fired by the boss. He might even have to bear a large debt. Fortunately, not only did Guhan not lose a cent, but he also earned a few million. Therefore, not only was the clerk not punished, but he was also rewarded by the manager. He was given a month's salary as a bonus, so he was beaming with joy. Sir, what business do you have with us? Is there something wrong with that Yanhuang 3008? You just need to tell us, and we'll fix it properly for you. The clerk snapped out of his daze and immediately stuck close to Guhan, serving Guhan well. This was a super rich man. Who knew? You might even buy a super hover sport car from him in the future. He could not afford to lose such a customer. Just as the shop assistant had expected, Guhan's first request was to buy another super hover sports car. Moreover, he wanted to buy another Yanhuang 3008. This was something that couldn't be helped. If Guhan wanted to return to Yuzhong City, he would need a super hover car. Although there was still an hour before the super hover train to Yuzhong City left, it was not a problem for Guhan to take the armored hover train back. However, the commissioner of the Sword Committee, who was in charge of supervising the smelting of the broken sword lady, was also on the armored hover train. If he took the armored hover train, Guhan and the commissioner would arrive at Yuzhong City at the same time. If that happened, whether or not Guhan could get the broken sword lady before the commissioner was a huge risk. There was another problem. Although the armored hover train was safe, its speed was very slow. When Guhan came, it took him 7 days to reach Yanjing City. This round trip took 14 days, and he had to go to the furnace of heaven and earth in between. In this way, it was impossible for Guhan to make it to the 8 school assembly in 15 days. After all, Guhan had promised the tiger's roar sword spirit. At the same time, he was representing Yuzhong City. If he could not be absent, Guhan did not want to be absent. Therefore, Guhan had to go to Yuzhong City alone. That super hover sports car that was fast enough became Guhan's essential transportation tool. And Guhan's original Yanhuang 3008 had been given to the Ministry of Transportation as a bargaining chip. Naturally, he did not have the face or the time to ask for it back. Fortunately, Guhan had a lot of money now. He could just spend some more money to buy another Yanhuang 3008. However, when Guhan mentioned that he wanted to buy another Yanhuang 3008, the shop assistant had a troubled look on his face. Their shop was located in a remote area, and their main customers could not afford such an expensive super hover sports car like the Yanhuang 3008. Therefore, their shop did not have long-term stock. The previous Yanhuang 3008 was just about to be delivered to the Yuzhong branch, so it was stored in their shop. Therefore, their shop no longer had a Yanhuang 3008. Even if Gahan had the money, he could not buy it. Immediately, Gahan suggested that they could lower the price and buy a slightly slower super hover sports car. However, the shop assistant helplessly said that the fastest maglev sports car in their shop did not exceed 1,500 kilometers per hour. Forget it. Looks like I have to make a trip back to the core area. Gahan was helpless. He could only make a trip back to the core area and buy a super hover sports car from the 4S shop. Seeing that his super rich customer was leaving, the shop assistant panicked. He hurriedly pulled Gahan's hand and said, "Sir, let me ask you one thing. Is it fine as long as it's a car that's fast enough?" "That's right. As long as it's fast enough, it's fine." Gahan nodded. "Then I'll bring you to a place. There will definitely be something that can satisfy your requirements. However, you must promise me that you will never mention that place to anyone else. Otherwise, I will not be able to keep my life." The shop assistant looked around cautiously, then whispered to Gahan. It was as if he really wanted to bring Gahan to a very mysterious place. "Lead the way." Gahan did not beat around the bush and said directly. Following the footsteps of the little shop assistant, Gahan walked all the way out. Finally, they left the 4th Ring Road and entered Yanjing City's 5th Ring Road. As mentioned before, Yanjing City's 5th Ring Road was not a residential area, but an industrial area. Therefore, there were almost no people in the 5th Ring Road. Even if there were people, they would stay in the factories. The streets were empty, and only a pedestrian could be seen every 10 minutes. Under the guidance of the shop assistant, after a series of turns, Gahan finally arrived at his destination. It was a place with a conspicuous sign that said, "Warehouse restricted, unauthorized persons not allowed." "Friend, what kind of car are you showing me? Why is it in such a secret place?" "Good car. Definitely a good car." The shop assistant shrunk his head. "That's prehistoric technology. I heard that it was invented by humans millions of years ago." Chapter 752. Prehistoric technology was not a new term to the general public or to Gahan. More than 300 years ago, a human named Jindy fought with the desolate level Yuan Ko. They fought their way to a depth of more than 60 kilometers underground. Then, they discovered the ruins of a human civilization deep underground. It was called the Prehistoric Civilization No. 1 Ruins. At the same time, because the ruins were discovered in Australia, combined with the ancient legends of Australia, the civilization was named the Lemurian Civilization. According to the little information that humans had left, the Lemurian civilization disappeared 60 million years ago. It was a super prehistoric civilization that was the closest to modern humans. The reason for its destruction was said to be an interplanetary war with the 10th planet of the solar system. The final result was the complete disappearance of the Lemurian civilization, and the 10th planet of the solar system was blown into dust by the Lemurian civilization's Q-bomb attack. Although the historians had always been full of doubts about this legend, because this legend did not come from any historical information, but from the writing of a web novel writer before the apocalypse. However, no matter how much the historians doubted this story, there was no doubt that before the emergence of this generation of human civilization, there was already a previous generation of human civilization, and the previous generation of human civilization was completely wiped out due to some tragic reason. This could not help but remind people of the situation of modern humans. Similarly, science had also developed to the peak of planetary civilization, the beginning of space civilization, and then humans encountered something like Yuan Ko. If it was not for the sudden appearance of the Sword Lady, perhaps humans would have long disappeared without a trace like the previous generation of civilization. Perhaps after another 60 million years, the next generation of humans would be able to discover how glorious the human civilization was through the underground ruins. At the beginning, the Sword Committee also wanted to hide this matter, but later on, for some reason, the The Sword Committee suddenly changed their mind and began to publicize the matter of the prehistoric civilization. They even filmed more than a dozen documentaries about this matter, causing a period of prehistoric civilization fever. Without a doubt, the prehistoric civilization had helped mankind in many ways. Since the discovery of the prehistoric civilization's ruins, many relics of the prehistoric civilization have been excavated from the ruins. These relics included a large number of quantum technology and medical biotechnology. These technologies, after being improved and reset by human scientists, became a series of quantum technological products, such as quantum teleportation arrays, quantum photocopiers, quantum communication networks, and so on. Biomedical technology, on the other hand, evolved into the miraculous black technology that reconstructed severed limbs, regenerated bodies, super medical cabins, and so on, saving countless sword-bearers from the brink of death. Still, it was unusual that the Lemurian civilization only had quantum technology and biomedical technology, with no achievements in other areas. Some people would say that this was very normal. Different civilizations definitely had different strengths. This civilization was good at quantum technology and biomedical technology. So what if their other technologies were inferior? In this regard, Gahan expressed his doubts. Other technologies might indeed be inferior because of the characteristics of civilization. But as a super civilization that could wage war against another planet in the solar system, how could they not have outstanding space navigation technology? At the very least, it should be able to travel unimpeded in the solar system. However, after the discovery of the Lemurian civilization, mankind did not have any outstanding development in space technology. They only slowly advanced according to the technological level before the cataclysm, and only a few decades ago did they barely manage to build a forward base on the moon. The current human space technology was like the canoes of ancient times. It was the simplest and most inferior technology. Only God knew when they would be able to build a behemoth like an aircraft carrier that could travel unimpeded in the sea. So the super maglev flying car from the Lemurian civilization that the shop assistant mentioned had piqued Guhan's interest. According to the Sword Council, the Lemurian civilization did not include maglev technology. When Gahan was still the Sword Garrett's master, he had also looked up information on the Lemurian civilization and found that there was no record of maglev technology in the database. This was very interesting. Was the shop assistant making things up, or was the Sword Council lying? Even the Sword Garrett's master of Yuzhong City could not access this confidential information. Gahan was very interested. Not long after, Guhan saw the true appearance of this prehistoric super maglev flying car. The car sat quietly in the warehouse. Unlike what he had imagined, this flying car didn't have a heaven-shattering exterior design. It was just a smooth, droplet-shaped exterior that was extremely simple, resembling the style of a certain brand from before the Great Calamity called Apple. There were 3 or 4 guards standing around with guns slung over their shoulders looking at the super maglev flying car. The guards' eyes were unfocused. Although their limbs were full of muscles, they did not have a solid foundation. Even among ordinary humans, these guards were only slightly stronger than the average person. They were not elites. To be honest, Guhan did not care about such trash guards. Even if the guns on their backs ran out of bullets, they would not be able to pose a threat to Guhan. As a result, the defense of this super hovering flying car was very lax. Not to mention a famed sword-tier swordsman like Guhan. Even a normal ancient sword-tier swordsman might be able to steal this super hovering flying car. Third brother, why are you here now? Don't you have work to do? A guard came up to greet him. Seeing Gahan being brought over by the shop assistant, he put on a look of realization. So, you brought a customer here. That's right, that's right. This old man is a super tycoon. He paid the full amount of the yen huang 3008 without batting an eyelid. This old man said he wanted to buy a super maglev flying car that is faster than the yen huang 3008, so I brought him here. The shop assistant said with a smile. Is that so? Did you report this to the boss? The guard asked again. I did. I already told the whole thing to Boss Chun, and he gave his approval. Otherwise, I would not have dared to bring someone here. The shop assistant laughed. How about it? Why don't you let this old man take a closer look at this maglev flying car? Take a closer look. The guard glared at the shop assistant and said carelessly, "This is a flying car from the prehistoric civilization. How can it be casually looked at? It's not like you can't look at it if you want. Pay up 10,000 renminbi for a minute." These guards were indeed a motley crew. Other than money, there was nothing else in their eyes. They did not care about driving away their potential customers. Fortunately, Guhan didn't care about this bit of money now. He simply took out his personal terminal and touched the guard's personal terminal, transferring 10,000 yuan over. Hee hee, you are indeed a tycoon. The guard laughed proudly. Look, but you're only allowed to look, not touch. If you dare to touch even a speck of paint on this super maglev flying car, I will pierce through your hand. Gahan did not say a word. He only nodded and walked to the side of the super maglev flying car. He walked around the car and realized that it was indeed prehistoric technology. There was not a single crack on the entire body of the maglev flying car. There were no rivets, seams, or screw holes. The entire maglev flying car looked like it was carved out of a huge piece of jade. Every part was seamless, and it was not something that could be produced by humans. What's the fastest speed of this car? In less than a minute, Gohan left the maglev flying car and asked the guard, "Brother, I'll be honest with you. I don't know how fast it can go." Perhaps because he had received 10,000 renminbi from Gahan, the guard's attitude towards Gahan was much better. Ever since this maglev flying car was dug up, no one has driven it to their heart's content. Naturally, no one has been able to drive it to its maximum speed. So, we don't know what the maximum speed of this maglev flying car is. What's the upper limit displayed on the dashboard? Generally speaking, if the maximum speed of a maglev flying car was 1,000 kilometers per hour, then the upper limit displayed on the dashboard would be 1,200 kilometers per hour. So, based on the markings on the dashboard, the maximum speed of the maglev flying car could be calculated. I don't know either. The guard waved his hand. This maglev flying car doesn't even have a steering wheel in the driver's seat, not to mention something like a dashboard. In fact, other than two chairs, there's nothing else in the maglev flying car. Not even a steering wheel? Then, how do we control this maglev flying car? Behind Gahan, Reina Kosaka could not help but ask. This was the first time she had spoken since coming to the warehouse. Use your mind. The guard gave Gohan a very sci-fi answer. As long as you're in the driver's seat, the maglev will be able to move with just a thought. It can even speed up, decelerate, and turn according to your will. According to one of my brothers who has driven this maglev flying car before, this maglev flying car feels like it's his own legs. He can move it however he wants. If that's the case, then this maglev flying car is controlled through human brainwaves. Gahan said thoughtfully, brainwave control technology was already in its infancy even before the apocalypse. However, even after 1,000 years, brainwave control technology was still facing many problems. Humans still did not have the perfect technology in this area. So, maglev flying cars still use the more primitive manual control technology or AI automatic control technology. Can I get in the car and try driving? Guhan couldn't help but ask. No. The guard rejected him without hesitation. Chapter 753. Big Brother. Go to the bathroom. Gahan extended a hand towards the guard. Then, the personal terminal on Gahan's arm suddenly projected a line of words. On it was clearly written the words, 50,000 renminbi. Our boss said that if any outsider gets into this hovercraft, he or she can disappear right under our noses with just a thought. So, no one is allowed to enter the driver's seat of this hovercraft, not even us. So I'm sorry, the guard said with a pained expression when he saw the 50,000 renminbi. Then let me speak to your boss. Gahan said again. No, absolutely not. The guard still refused. Our boss said that he would not speak to any outsiders. Even we rarely speak to our boss. Don't even think about it. At this point, the guard's face was already showing signs of impatience. I say, are you going to buy it or not? If not, Then get out of here. Don't disturb my business. All right, then give me a price. Gohan did not have the time to waste with these people. He guessed that these people would not dare to use a fake hovercraft to deceive him. Otherwise, they would be more than happy to go to the Discipline Inspection Commission's prison. Oh, that's not right. They did not have the qualifications to enter the Discipline Inspection Commission's prison. They would probably just randomly find a prison where some prisoners who had not seen a woman for decades were locked up. A fixed price, 66,666 renminbi. The guard revealed a price that sounded a little scary to the ears of ordinary people. However, to Gohan, this price seemed exceptionally cheap. Previously, he had actually bought a super hovercraft for 66,666 renminbi. It was even cheaper than that Yen Huang 3008. Where else could he find such a good deal? Therefore, Gohan agreed to this price on the spot and happily paid the full amount. He even added an additional 10,000 renminbi to each of the guards. And so, under everyone's happy smiles, Gohan finally boarded the super hovercraft made by the prehistoric civilization. Connecting consciousness connected. Beginning confirmation. First, Master's animal species confirmed, serial number 8001, animal human, meets the basic requirements of the operator. Dear operator, welcome to the Scientific Research Vehicle serial number 44757865. You are now free to pilot the Scientific Research Vehicle serial number 44757865. This thought flashed in Gohan's mind. However, this thought was not like the human mind tools that used words to transmit thoughts. Instead, it was a pure thought. This kind of feeling could not be described with words. Those who sensed it all knew what it meant, but when they really wanted to describe it, they could not say a single word. Get in. Gohan shouted at the top of his lungs, but Reina Takasaka, who was waiting by the car, did not say a word. She just stood there without moving. What? Didn't I tell you to get in? Gohan said impatiently. This car doesn't have a seat for me. Takasaka Rina repeated herself 3 times before she could finish her sentence. It was just as Takasaka Rina had said. There was no seat for her in the car. That was because this flying car was an F1 racing car from before the apocalypse. There was only one seat for the driver and no other. That's not a problem, Gohan said calmly. Although there is only one seat, the space is huge. You can sit in front of me, and I'll give you half of the seat. Who wants you to give me half of the seat? Gohan's words made Takasaka Rina even angrier, or more accurately, she blushed even more. When people squeezed into buses or cars, they would definitely encounter situations where these two people had to sit in the same seat. Generally speaking, there were 2 positions when 2 people squeezed into the same seat. Either the seats were split in the middle, with the 2 people sitting on each side, squeezing half of their buttocks together, or the larger person would sit on the seat first and spread his legs, giving the empty seat to the other person. If the 2 people were simply friends, they would usually choose the first position. Only those couples who were very close to each other would choose this kind of ambiguous second position. It would be fine if Takasaka Rina and Gohan used the first position to squeeze into one seat, and Takasaka Rina could bear with it for a while. But the problem was that this flying car was just as Gohan said, with a lot of space in the driver's seat. But the space was vertical and not horizontal. This flying car was less than 0. 6 meters wide, and, sitting Gohan 0, 5 meter wide, but was already very strenuous. If Takasaka Rina's 0, 4 meter wide, but was added to the mix, it was impossible to imagine how awkward it would be and how the 2 buttocks would be squeezed together. So for Gohan and Takasaka Rina, the second position was the only reasonable solution. But Takasaka Rina seemed to be unable to accept the fact that she had to sit on Gohan's lap. Even after Gohan urged her repeatedly, she still refused to get on the car. Do I have to write 3,000 words just to get on the car? Gohan mumbled in a language that even he did not understand. Suddenly, a sword aura shot out from his hand and wrapped around Takasaka Rina's waist, pulling her into the flying car. Holy shit, that's a superpower. One of the guards said, dumbfoundedly when he saw Takasaka Rina being pulled into the flying car by something invisible. Idiot, that's not a superpower. It's the sword aura of a swordsman. The person who spoke to Gahan was quite knowledgeable. He actually recognized that Gahan was using sword aura. But the next moment, the guard's expression changed drastically. This is bad. This man is a swordsman. Boss has said that we are not allowed to do business with swordsmen. After saying that, the guard hurriedly approached the hovercraft, wanting to pull Guhan off the hovercraft. Unfortunately, it was too late. The moment the guard took a step forward, the hovercraft shot out of the warehouse like a rocket. In less than 2 seconds, it disappeared from the guard's sight. Damn it, where's 3? Come out. Why the F***CK did you bring a swordsman here? The guard shouted 3's name angrily. 3 was the shop assistant who led Gahan to the warehouse. Unfortunately, when Gahan arrived, 3 seemed to have sensed something and left the warehouse. Boss, it's me. The guard immediately reported to his boss. Boss, the person who bought the flying car is a swordsman. What should we do now? He shouldn't be able to leave Yinjing City in time. Should we send someone to block him at the exit? Not necessary. Why? After hearing the answer from his boss, the guard asked curiously, because I'm useless? The guard stupidly repeated his boss's answer and then immediately reacted. He immediately threw away the gun in his hand and wanted to run away, but it was too late. The entire warehouse suddenly let out a huge explosion and then completely turned into ashes. A few minutes later, the fire truck arrived and found that the workers inside had been burned to ashes. According to the investigation, it was found that these workers had illegally stacked a large amount of gasoline in the warehouse. Then another worker courted death by smoking in the warehouse and finally ignited the gasoline and caused an explosion. The entire investigation report was very detailed and convincing. This matter was sealed in the archives of the fire department, and no one cared about the real story behind it. Let me go. I don't want to sit on you. When the flying car started moving, the sword aura that Gahan had bound Rina Takasaka disappeared. Rina Takasaka was able to break free and quickly moved her, but away from Gahan's body. Watch out for your head. Before Guhan could finish his sentence, Rina Takasaka slammed her head on the roof of the flying car, creating a crisp sound. Looking at Reina Takasaka's clumsy reflexes, Guhan found it hard to connect this Reina Takasaka with the Reina Takasaka who almost killed him a few months ago in the Miling mountain range. You don't have to worry about my business. Reina Takasaka glared at Gahan. Suddenly, she realized that the seat was indeed quite spacious. So, she simply sat on the ground. Although it was a very uncomfortable position and she had to curl her legs up, it was the best position she could think of to separate herself from Gahan. Gahan did not pay much attention to Reina Takasaka's choice. As long as she could quietly stay in the driver's seat and not cause trouble for him, it was fine. Compared to Reina Takasaka, Gahan was more interested in figuring out how this flying car worked. From the 10 minutes of driving, Gahan did not feel any obvious feeling of a buttock being pushed under his butt. That was because a normal flying car would use a magnetic jet under the chassis to release gas to hover in the air and then drive at high speed. Therefore, no matter how advanced a flying car was, the passenger would inevitably feel a force pushing upward from his butt. This was scientifically known as the feeling of a buttock being pushed. However, this flying car did not have such a feeling. Not only was there no feeling of a buttock being pushed, he could not even feel the feeling of a buttock being pushed. Sitting in this flying car, it felt like it was parked on the road. But in reality, the hover car was moving forward at a speed of 100 kilometers per hour. If not for the constantly changing scenery outside the window, Guhan would have had a hard time believing that this was a moving hover car. This is real black technology, Gahan exclaimed. Chapter 754. The east gate of Yinjing City's 7th Ring Road could be considered the most deserted exit in Yinjing City. The armored hover train and the other trucks entered from the west gate, while most of the sword-bearers entered from the south gate. This was because the east gate directly faced a vast expanse of farmland, and these farmland had achieved a high degree of automation. There were less than 200 people from outside the city responsible for monitoring the situation of each farmland in every control room. Those who really needed to enter and leave Jing City from the east gate were only these 200 or so people from outside the city. Many times, the number of people and vehicles entering and leaving the east gate did not even exceed 10 times in a day. Therefore, although the entire east gate had 10 entrances, the other 9 were all in a closed state, and only one entrance was open. On this day, the administrator of this entrance was bored to death as he used his personal terminal to read a novel downloaded from a forum. In this day and age, if the content of a web novel didn't have a bit of an erotic plot, then no one would be interested in reading such a novel. This administrator saw an interesting part. The male lead of the novel, the sword-bearer, saved a beautiful, ordinary human female lead and sat in a hover car, preparing to escape from Yuanko's lair. The male lead suddenly, unfortunately, discovered that he had been poisoned. This novel would make all the blood in the male lead's body converge at one point, and then with a bang, the converge point would completely explode. Then, in order to save the male lead's life, the female lead could only give up her shyness, and in this small space of the hover car, used her own mouth to soothe the male lead's burgeoning body. Just as the administrator was reading in high spirits, he suddenly heard the sound of a horn. This administrator raised his head reluctantly and saw a water droplet-shaped hover car parked at the exit, preparing to leave Yanjing City. There's actually a hover car leaving for the east gate. The last time a hover car left from here was 5 or 6 days ago. The administrator thought with some doubt, but after thinking about it carefully, it didn't seem strange. After all, this was an exit of Yanjing City, and it was normal for a few hover cars to occasionally leave from here. In fact, the administrator was more interested in the appearance of this hover car. It was a perfect water droplet shape, and its entire body was natural, without a trace of artificial casting. Looking at the administrator, a desire to own such a hovercraft was ignited in his heart. Sigh, what kind of useless things are I thinking about? I'm afraid I can't even afford a single wheel of this hovercraft with 20 years of salary. The manager sighed. At that moment, the hovercraft raised its roof. The driver stretched out his hand and touched his personal terminal to the scanner at the exit. This person is actually the sword-bearer of Yuzhong City. The manager had worked here for more than 10 years, but he had never seen more than 10 people in Yuzhong City. So when he saw that Gahan belonged to Yuzhong City, he was very surprised. Comrade, you're going back to Yuzhong City. How is Yuzhong City doing? I heard that you were miserable during the Great Invasion. This administrator really didn't know how to conduct himself. How could he directly ask how miserable Yuzhong City was during the invasion? And Guhan responded with an, which could be considered as an answer. Comrade, where did you buy this hovercraft? What brand is it called? It's really beautiful. I'm going to look for pictures online to satisfy my craving. Gahan didn't know what brand this hovercraft was. At that moment, the inspection procedures were automatically completed, and the barricade at Yanjing City's main gate was raised. Seeing this, Gahan immediately commanded the hovercraft to move forward, and in the blink of an eye, it had left the administrator's line of sight. What's so great about it? Seeing that Gahan didn't answer his question and drove away, the administrator was naturally filled with anger. He immediately began to look at the nearby surveillance cameras, wanting to get a picture of Gahan, and then curse Gahan fiercely. However, when a surveillance video appeared in front of the administrator was surprised to find that there was something wrong with the video. Between Guhan's legs, there was a long-haired girl sitting under the seat. The girl's face couldn't be seen clearly, but her head was directly facing Gahan's crotch. Any man with a rich imagination could instantly figure out what had just happened. Wow, this is actual combat. The administrator immediately flipped through the book he had just read and reread the plot in the novel. In an instant, it was as if the male and female protagonists were perfectly ensnared in the heads of Gahan and the girl with long, black hair. No wonder he didn't want to pay attention to me. He was busy doing something. The administrator instantly understood Gu Han's thoughts with his own way of thinking, but he was still unhappy in his heart. He secretly took a dozen of the clearest and most imaginative pictures from the video and posted them on the forum. He named it "Lecherous Swordsman Had Sex in the Car in Front of the Surveillance Camera." As a result, Gu Han instantly became a hot topic in the entire Yinjing City's forum, and it also laid the groundwork for what happened later. After leaving Yinjing City, there was no longer a city speed limit of 100 kilometers per hour, so Gu Han could finally try driving the hovercraft to its maximum speed. Because the hovercraft didn't have a dashboard to measure speed, Gu Han could only use the map navigation function of his personal terminal to calculate his driving speed. In the end, Gu Han was shocked to discover that this seemingly unparalleled maglev hovercraft wasn't moving very fast at full speed, only about 800 kilometers per hour. Even a maglev hovercraft from 400 years ago was faster than this hovercraft. This discovery made Gu Han's expression turn ugly. Gu Han even wanted to turn around and return the car immediately. He thought he had picked up some treasure, but he didn't expect it to be such a good-looking but useless thing. But this couldn't be blamed on anyone else. It was Gu Han's own conceit. He took it for granted that this high-class, prehistoric hovercraft should naturally have a speed that surpassed the current human standard. This matter also made Gu Han take warning. It was just like what a famous person before the apocalypse had said. Don't think that the American democratic system will definitely elect the best. The American people may elect a president like Roosevelt, but it could also be Trump. Speaking of which, who was this Trump? The President of the United States, who was proficient in Sichuan Mandarin? Gu Han was very puzzled. Although the speed of the hovercraft was only average, Gu Han immediately discovered the benefits of this droplet flying car. This hovercraft actually didn't need to slow down on the road. The maximum speed of the hovercraft could only be achieved on flat roads. In the real world outside the city, the hovercraft had no choice but to use most of its engine power to increase its height due to the terrible environment. This way, the hovercraft could only be driven as high as possible in the dense forest. At that time, most of the engine power of the hovercraft was used to increase its height, so the power used to increase its speed was naturally less. When driving on the highway ruins, the hovercraft could reach a speed of about 800 kilometers per hour. But if it entered a complex forest environment, this speed could even be reduced to less than 100 kilometers per hour. Moreover, the driver of the hovercraft had to be fully focused and alert to the surrounding environment. If they weren't careful, the hovercraft could crash into a tree, resulting in a tragic car accident. But this droplet flying car was different. To Gu Han's surprise, no matter what kind of terrain it faced, this hovercraft could travel at the same speed. According to its operating principle, it didn't need to expend a large amount of power to increase its height. It seemed to be able to increase and decrease its height from the ground without expending any power. So, no matter how complex the terrain was, it didn't need to expend any extra power to reduce its speed. That was why after leaving Yinjing City, Gu Han could actually maintain a speed of 800 kilometers per hour. A simple calculation of the averages showed that overall, the droplet flying car was slightly faster. In fact, for Gu Han, the fastest way to return to Yuzhong City was to follow the restored highway that the armored hovercraft had taken when he came. But the entire highway was under human surveillance, and his flying car would definitely be captured by the surveillance cameras on the road. If the people of Yinjing City found out that he had left Yinjing City to return to Yuzhong City temporarily, it would be bad. The 8th Academy Assembly was about to begin, so why did he run back to Yuzhong City? And when he ran back to Yuzhong City, the broken sword just happened to disappear. Even a fool would be able to guess that it had something to do with him. So, Gu Han could only take the small road and return to Yuzhong City through the jungle. In this way, the advantage of the droplet flying car's speed and stability was even more perfect. The droplet flying car was good, but its biggest weakness was that it was too narrow. Even with Gu Han's physique, he felt sore and weak after sitting for a while, not to mention Rina Takasaka between Gu Han's legs. What gave Gu Han a headache was that in Gu Han's Zifu, Qingpin was constantly shouting and making noise, saying that she didn't want to stay in the scabbard anymore, and that she wanted to sit on Gahan's neck and stay in Gahan's pocket. Rina Takasaka was already enough to squeeze in here, and if Qingpin was added, who knew how noisy it would be? If only the space could be a little more spacious. Such a thought emerged in Gahan's mind, and in the next moment, something miraculous happened. The entire space in the droplet flying car suddenly began to expand in all directions. Be it in length, width, or height, all of them continued to grow. In the end, it expanded into a large rectangular space that was tens of meters long, tens of meters wide, and 2 meters tall. Could it be that this droplet flying car can expand and contract freely? Gahan immediately rushed to the windshield that was already more than 10 meters away from him, and was shocked to find that he was driving in a sparse forest. Although the forest was sparse, the longest distance between 2 trees was not more than 5 meters. But the droplet flying car could easily fly between 2 trees, which meant that the width of the droplet flying car was definitely less than 5 meters. But if that was the case, how could the width of more than 10 meters around Gahan be explained? Could it be that this droplet flying car uses space folding technology? A huge exclamation mark appeared in Gahan's mind. Space folding technology was a technology that humans could only use after mastering the dimensional crystal. They needed to borrow the power of the dimensional crystal to fold a large space into a small tent. But this was a droplet flying car invented by prehistoric humans. So how did they do it? Did they find another way to achieve space folding technology, or were the humans 60 million years ago also using dimensional crystals? Chapter 755. Due to the large space, Reina Takasaka and Gahan were able to stay far away from each other. Therefore, nothing interesting happened between the two of them. Gahan's main focus was on studying the flying droplet. After several hours of research, Gahan gradually discovered many more amazing technologies about the flying droplet. Some of them seemed like black technology to modern humans. The black technology of the droplet flying car could be summed up in 4 words, and that was do as you please. Gahan could almost do anything with his mind. This was not just controlling the droplet flying car to fly. In the hundreds of square meters of folded space of the droplet flying car, Gahan could use his mind to materialize anything. For example, if Gahan wanted to sleep, a bed would immediately appear next to him. If Gahan wanted to wash his hands, a sink would immediately appear. If he wanted a private bathroom, a fully equipped bathroom would immediately appear. Such an experience made Gahan feel like he had become a god. However, Gahan soon discovered that these things that appeared were the same. If he wanted a chair would indeed appear. However, when he wanted to ask for a red chair, the chair that appeared just now was still the same one. Another example was if Gahan wanted a bed. No matter how detailed Gahan described it, he wanted a small, simple single bed. In reality, a luxurious double bed made of pure wood would always appear. It was the same for the bathroom. If Gahan wanted a squatting toilet, it would always appear as a sitting toilet. Moreover, not everything Gahan wanted would appear. For example, if Gahan wanted a sword, there would be no response from the flying droplet. If Gahan wanted an animal like a cat or a dog, nothing would appear. Combining these phenomena, Gahan quickly figured out that these things that appeared out of nowhere were actually created in advance and hidden in the folded space. Once Gahan received the command from his mind, these things hidden in other spaces would immediately appear beside Gahan. To put it simply, the flying droplet was like a sword wielder with its own dimensional pocket. Once Gahan gave the command, the flying droplet would take out what Gahan wanted from its dimensional pocket. Therefore, when faced with some very detailed requests from Gahan, or something that the flying droplet's dimensional pocket did not have, the flying droplet could no longer meet Gahan's needs. After fully understanding this point, Gahan fell into deep thought. The dimensional pocket was something that could only be used by the sword wielder, and it required the sword essence of the sword wielder to be able to freely enter and take it out. If the flying droplet really used the technology of the dimensional pocket, then it must mean that in the Lemurian civilization 60 million years ago, humans could also freely use the sword essence. As for whether there was a sword maiden at that time, only God knew. Moreover, Gohan also vaguely discovered that the ability of the flying droplet was not as simple as it appeared to be. When Gohan's mind controlled the flying droplet, he could vaguely feel that the flying droplet had some deeper functions. But this function showed a state of complete resistance to Gohan's mind. No matter how Gohan conveyed his thoughts, the sealed things did not respond, and Gohan could only give up on this exploration. When it was late at night, Gohan could finally see a brightly lit city in front of him. Gohan had returned to Yuzhong City, and it had only been 8 hours since Gohan set off from Yanjing City. Such a short time not only surprised Gohan, but even Reina Kosaka was completely stunned. It must be known that it took Gohan 7 days to travel from Yuzhong City to Yanjing City in the armored levitating train, but now it only took him 8 hours to return to Yuzhong City. Of course, there were many other factors involved. For example, the armored levitating train used at least 4 days to repair the broken highway between Yuzhong City and Yanjing City. And Gohan's journey was smooth. Not even a Dragon-class Yuan Ko could catch up with Gohan's speed. He returned to Yuzhong City almost without stopping. But that wasn't the main reason. The main reason was the droplet flying car's superior ability to ignore terrain. When faced with complicated terrain, the levitating car could only travel at a speed of less than 100 kilometers per hour, sometimes even less than 10 kilometers per hour. But the droplet flying car could ignore the same terrain. It flew over the terrain without even slowing down. That was the main reason why the droplet flying car could return to Yuzhong City in only 8 hours. Let's go to the city, Gohan said to Reina Kosaka. Reina Kosaka nodded and followed Gohan to Yuzhong City. But halfway there, Reina Takasaka realized that something was amiss. Reina Takasaka had lived in Yuzhong City for less than a month, so she had a basic understanding of the city's geography. Gohan, who was leading the way, did not walk towards the city gate of Yuzhong City. Instead, he headed towards a location in the northwest corner of the city wall. Even if she was beaten to death, she would not believe that there was a city gate there. "Where are we going?" Reina Kosaka asked. "This isn't the way to the city. I can't go through the gate." Gohan replied faintly. "If it's possible, I hope that no one in Yuzhong City knows that I'm back. Do you understand what I mean? Are you going to do something shameful this time?" Only then did Reina Kosaka realize that Gohan's purpose for coming back was not simple. It's indeed something shameful. Gohan nodded and admitted readily. "Are you going to report me? I'm not human. I don't care if you humans live or die." Reina Kosaka muttered softly and said no more. It was only when Reina Kosaka and Gohan arrived at their destination that Reina Kosaka realized that she was wrong. There was indeed a gate at the northwest corner of the city wall. The gate was a hidden door, and no one was guarding it. Looking from outside the city wall, there was no sign of the gate's existence at all. However, as soon as Gohan got close to the city wall, he tapped on a small depression on the wall, and the originally seamless wall slowly opened up. Through the opening, Gohan and Reina Kosaka easily entered Yuzhong City. "How do you know there's a hidden gate here?" Reina Kosaka immediately regretted asking this question. She immediately realized what was going on. A hidden gate like this must have been designed by the Kenjutsu to arrange escape routes, or to launch a surprise attack on Yuan Ko. Gohan was once the Kenkaku cabinet master in Yuzhong City, so he must know all kinds of secrets in Yuzhong City. "Sure enough," Gohan answered, "this is an emergency exit. There are more than 20 such exits in Yuzhong City." After walking out of the hidden door, Reina Kosaka returned to Yuzhong City after 2 months. Reina Kosaka hesitated when she saw the familiar yet strange city. She did not know how she should face the city. "All right, I have a question for you. Reina Kosaka shouldn't be your real name, right? If I remember correctly, Reina Kosaka is the name of the sword woman in Yuzhong City. You're just impersonating her. What's your real name?" Gohan suddenly asked. Fleeting Reina Takasaka, who was immersed in her own thoughts, blurted out her real name. However, the name was not surprising at all. She had merely changed her surname to Fleeting Time. Gohan had already guessed that Reina Kosaka was Fleeting Time's daughter from his conversation with Fleeting Mookie and Fleeting Masa. However, he did not expect her real name to be Reina. It was the same name as the person she had impersonated. My name is not Fleeting Reina. It's Reina Kosaka. Fleeting Reina yelled at Gohan. She seemed to hate the name from the bottom of her heart. Whatever. I'll call you Reina then, said Gohan, and continued walking towards the core area. Gohan had many questions about Fleeting Reina. The most important question was whether Fleeting Time Reina was a human or not. Gohan had witnessed Fleeting Reina's ability to control the air with his own eyes. She did not have any sword maidens in her hands at that time, which meant that Fleeting Reina did not borrow the power of the sword maidens. She had used her own power to control the air. Where did Fleeting Time Reina's power come from? Did she awaken a superpower from a novel? She was able to control the power of the wind with her human body? Or was she the same as Misaka Mikoto, a human from another world? In other words, Yuan Ko, Gohan had been keeping a close eye on Fleeting Reina when she passed through the dimensional barrier of Yuzhong City. If the dimensional barrier was able to obstruct her, Gohan would immediately give up on the idea of letting Fleeting Reina enter Yuzhong City. He would instead send her to the Heaven and Earth Furnace to wait for him. However, nothing out of the ordinary happened when Fleeting Reina passed through the dimensional barrier. Gohan had no choice but to keep his worries to himself. Chapter 756. Gohan had gotten very close to this Grandmaster Swordsmith who had destroyed a broken sword. He had been locked up in the prison where Lu Yin had been held. The prison had even made a separate space for his forging laboratory. However, after the complete disappearance of the Sword Maiden, the sword forging guru, who had committed a grave crime, could no longer stay in prison. Instead, she was transferred to Mount Tai Prison, which was directly managed by the Sword Committee and was guarded by human special forces. Although the guns in the hands of human soldiers were not very effective against Yuan Ko and the sword bearers, they were still very effective against ordinary humans or swordsmiths. This was because these humans did not have personal shields, so they could not resist weapons like guns. In fact, guns could still pose a threat to Yuan Ko and the sword bearers. As long as bullets were made from dimensional alloys of a certain purity, human guns could still cause damage to Yuan Ko and the sword bearers. This was widely known after the true use of dimensional crystals was discovered. After knowing this, humans had once excitedly planned to rebuild their army and use airplanes and cannons to completely annihilate the damned Yuan Ko. Unfortunately, humans soon discovered that this was not realistic. Using dimensional alloys to make guns required a large number of dimensional crystals. For example, a huge mine like the Miling Mountain Range could not produce 1,000,000 bullets in a year. 1,000,000 bullets did not seem like a lot. Before the apocalypse, when the impoverished Yanhuang Empire, which had no industrial foundation, was attacked by Japan, it would consume about 10,000,000 bullets in a single battle. During the 8-Year War, Yanhuang Empire had consumed a total of 3 billion bullets. This number was because Yanhuang was too poor. On the battlefield in Europe, the rich Americans spent 7 billion bullets a year. The Germans used 3 billion bullets a year. Even the tiny England used more than 2 billion bullets a year, British and French Allied forces. Therefore, 1,000,000 bullets was simply a drop in the bucket in the war against Yuan Ko. In a large-scale battle, the bullets would be used up in less than an hour. By then, these troops could only wait for death. Moreover, for humans at that time, the most important thing was to use dimensional crystals to build a safe giant wall to protect the lives of ordinary humans. Therefore, the plan to build a firearms army was put on hold. In the end, as the sword bearers grew and took full control of the human regime, the idea of a firearms army was completely abandoned. However, although the idea of using firearms as an army was unrealistic, some of the elite special forces were a good idea. These special forces had excellent marksmanship. With bullets made of high-purity dimensional alloys, They could occasionally blow up mouse-grade or tiger-grade Yuan Ho with a single shot. Unfortunately, special forces and sword-bearers with such qualifications were as rare as the sword-bearers. Not many ordinary humans were willing to be soldiers. Therefore, the number of special forces had been maintained at around a few hundred. They were responsible for guarding some important departments, such as the Mount Tai prison in front of Gahan. Under the guard of these special forces, the entire Mount prison was impregnable. Mount Tai prison was impregnable. Under the threat of metal storms formed by pure dimensional crystals bullets, even the spiritual sword-bearers could explode instantly. Therefore, in the past hundreds of years, except for the Great Invasion, when it couldn't be defended, Mount Tai prison had never gone wrong. But now, the time for Mount Tai prison to go wrong had finally arrived. P.S. Regarding the setting of firearms, everyone must feel that it's very abrupt because there seems to be no foreshadowing in the previous text. It just appeared inexplicably. In fact, in the beginning, the author completely abandoned the setting of firearms. But later, many readers came to find the author, saying that according to the author's setting, firearms could still fight with Yuan Ko. Unless the human collective was mentally retarded, it was impossible not to discover the benefits and feasibility of building a firearms army. This was a huge logical error. The author thought for a long time and felt that the readers were right. Since the dimensional crystals were designed, firearms became a possibility. Unless the author admitted that he was mentally retarded, firearms should exist in the Sword Maiden's world. After resetting, the setting of Firearms Army was hastily added after more than 700 chapters. But please rest assured, the Firearms Army is just a foil. The real worldview will not change on a large scale. Their appearance is not a foreshadowing, but just to make the Sword Maiden's world more perfect. These special forces guards of Mount Tai prison were using their sharp eyes to search the surroundings of the prison. Above their heads, the brand new high-energy laser radar had completely covered the entire surrounding environment. Even if a fly flew in, it couldn't escape the eyes of these special forces. This kind of high-energy laser radar was currently the most advanced black technology of mankind. Even if a spirit sword wielder was holding a killing sword maiden, this radar could detect him. Therefore, these special forces trusted the radar in their hands very much, which was more trust than their own eyes. It was reasonable to say that this kind of security was already very tight to the extreme. It was absolutely impossible for anyone to escape this kind of security. However, when all of this was done by a high-level mole, all of this became a complete decoration. Under Liu Shihua's remote control, these radar were collectively blinded. There was obviously a person swaggering under their scanning, but there was not even a fly on the display of these radar. Winter is good. Unlike summer, the whole screen is full of flies that stung people to death. A Special Forces sentry said to his comrade beside him, "Idiot, it's not a fly that stings people, it's a mosquito." The Special Forces soldier who spoke glanced at his comrade with contempt. With just a glance, he seemed to have seen something flash past his line of sight. Not good. There's someone. This Special Forces soldier immediately raised his loaded automatic rifle and shouted, "What are you panicking for? I've been staring at the radar, and there was indeed something flashing past just now. But it's not a person, it's a fly." The comrade said disdainfully, "I see." The nervous Special Forces soldier put down his weapon, let out a long sigh of relief, and patted his comrade on the shoulder. "We will be discharged in a few months. What are you going to do after that?" "Don't worry, I already have an idea." The comrade laughed. "I'm going to be a bodyguard for the beautiful CEO or the campus belle. Then I can get a promotion and a raise in salary, reach the pinnacle of life, and marry a Ms. Perfect." "Why do you have to be a bodyguard for the beautiful CEO or the campus belle?" The other Special Forces soldier asked in confusion. "Also, why can a bodyguard get a promotion and a raise in salary, reach the pinnacle of life, and marry him is perfect? Is there such a logic?" "Of course there is. This is a true story from before the apocalypse. Someone even recorded it." With that said, the Special Forces soldier clicked on his personal terminal, and a novel titled the personal special forces bodyguard of the beautiful president of the city's campus belle, entered the eyes of the other special forces soldier. While the two special forces soldiers were reading the novel and looking forward to a promotion and a raise in salary, Gahan had already snuck into Mount Tai prison. Gahan did not bring fleeting time Lena with him. Instead, he asked her to find a hotel to stay in and wait for him to contact her. Gahan was confident that he could sneak into Mount Tai prison alone, but he did not have the confidence to bring fleeting time Lena with him. According to the information that Gahan had, the broken sword was still in the hands of the Grandmaster Swordsmith. It seemed that the Grandmaster Swordsmith had not given up on his experiment and was determined to carry on with it. The broken sword was hidden within Mount Tai prison. Once the special forces of the Swordsmith Association arrived, the Grandmaster Swordsmith would have to reforge the broken sword and return it to the earth. Through long-distance communication with Liu Shihua, Guhan quickly found the storage room where the broken sword was. Similarly, under Liu Shihua's remote control, the door that was protected by 36 layers of encryption was completely opened in less than a second. One couldn't blame the door for its poor defense. If the owner opened the door faster, there would be no need for the door to exist anymore. The moment the door was closed and the lights were switched on, Gahan saw the broken sword in the display cabinet. The blade of the sword that was originally bright was now gray, like a rusted machine. It gave off a strange feeling of dilapidation. The blade of the sword had been split into two, and the jagged cut on the blade showed that the ancient sword had been through an intense and cruel battle. In the end, it was broken into two and given to the Grandmaster Swordsmith as a test subject. In the end, the Grandmaster Swordsmith destroyed its own soul. "I'm sorry." Looking at the dagger, Guhan was silent for a long time. Then he very respectfully bent his waist and bowed 3 times to the broken dagger. Each time, his head touched his knees before he straightened his back. This was Guhan's apology to the broken sword, as well as humanity's apology to her. Her soul did not die in the hands of Yuan Ko, but was destroyed in the hands of humanity. Goddess of Zhongyan, instead of silently mixing with the soil, why not lend your body to a comrade and let her use your body to obtain a new life? Isn't this a kind of rebirth for you? I hope you can understand my actions. If you can't, then I, Gahan, will bear all the sins. This has nothing to do with King Yu. Guhan muttered to the sword of Zhongyan. Chapter 757. The broken sword in Gahan's hand was called Zhongyan's sword, and it was an ancient sword maiden. According to the records, this sword maiden seemed to be the weapon of an assassin from the Middle Ages. This assassin was unknown, so this Zhongyan sword was also unknown. Naturally, the Zhongyan sword's ability was also unknown. It was ranked at the bottom of the ancient sword record, around 200th to 300th from the bottom. It was precisely because Zhongyan's sword's ability was not strong that the Sword Council mercilessly handed it over to this swordsmith grandmaster to experiment on after it broke. If it had been an ancient sword maiden ranked 200th to 300th from the ancient sword record, the Sword Council would not have taken the risk to give it to this grandmaster. The entire matter could be said to be Zhongyan's sword sorrow, the swordsmith grandmaster's sorrow, and the Sword Council's sorrow. King Yu, you could take a look. This is your future body. Guhan shouted King Yu's name, but he took out Juzi's sword. This was because when he tried to bring King Yu's soul out of the game, King Yu's soul and Juzi's soul were brought into Juzi's sword's body. Thus, Juzi's sword had 2 sword maiden souls. However, according to King Yu's complaints, staying in Juzi's sword body was like having a very narrow attic. He was just a passerby in Juzi County's body that could be chased away at any time. If Juzi's sword was unhappy, King Yu's soul would immediately be chased out of Juzi's sword and disappear into the air. Is this the future me? Should I change my name to Zhongyan's sword? The moment King Yu saw his body, he was incomparably excited. But after the excitement, King Yu calmed down and suddenly felt a sense of unwillingness. This Zhongyan sword is actually ranked in the bottom 200th among ancient sword maidens. If I enter her body, wouldn't I go from being one of the best famed sword maidens to a useless, trashy, ancient sword maidens? Thinking of this, King Yu became even more sorrowful. I don't want that. Suddenly, King Yu said unexpectedly, I don't want to enter this Zhong Dian sword's body. I don't want to become as useless as her. A sword maiden like her will only break in two. I'd rather die than become a sword maiden like her. This sudden turn of events caused Guhan's expression to instantly become complicated and angry. He spent so much effort and finally found this broken sword. He also found a suitable body for King Yu. But at this time, King Yu told her to give up. Then wouldn't her hard work be in vain? King Yu, stop messing around. Guhan said calmly, don't worry. As long as you are in my hands, I will never let you break. I will protect you forever, hold you, and grow old with you until the end of my life. For Guhan, this was a very rare thing to say. With Guhan's personality, it was rare for him to say such sweet words. However, these sweet words were useless in King Yu's ears. King Yu seemed to have fallen into a trance. I don't want it. I'd rather die than become a sword maiden like this. I'm fine staying in Juzi's body. I'll stay like this for now. Be obedient. Guhan sighed and reached for the Zhongyan sword in the display case. As he did so, he said to King Yu, calm down for a while. Once you're done, you'll realize that this is your best choice. No, never. King Yu's trance became even more intense. Even if I enter the heaven and earth furnace, I'd rather my soul dissipate than run into this trash sword maiden's body. To me, this is worse than death. Ignoring King Yu's roars in his mind, he held the broken Zhongdian sword and prepared to leave Mount Tai prison. However, what Guhan could not take was that King Yu's roars in his mind became louder and louder. In the end, it reached the level of a roar. It was as if there were two heavy subwoofers in his head, and these two heavy subwoofers were making annoying noises at their loudest. This gave Guhan a headache. Juzi, can you make her shut up? Guhan felt helpless and could only ask Juzi. Yes. Juzi's answer was very concise. Then make her shut up. Guhan's order was equally concise. After Guhan's order was given, King Yu's voice instantly disappeared from Guhan's mind. The entire world instantly fell silent. Juzi, how did you do it? Guhan, who had relaxed, asked Juzi. At this moment, he was a little worried that Juzi had used some forceful method. For example, she had suppressed King Yu's soul or forced her soul out of the Juzi sword. If that happened, Guhan would regret it endlessly. I only sealed the connection between the Juzi sword and Master's soul. Juzi's words were true. When Juzi spoke, King Yu's crazy voice appeared in Guhan's mind again. As Juzi spoke, King Yu's voice also disappeared. Then want to be hard on you? I'll let you bear this alone. Guhan suddenly felt a little embarrassed. Even he couldn't bear King Yu's crazy voice. Letting Juzi bear it alone must be very painful. Sister King Yu's soul is in my body, so Juzi can also feel her pain. At this point, Juzi fell silent. Master, there's something Juzi doesn't know if she should say. Say it. There's nothing that can't be said between the sword maiden and the sword wielder. Guhan said without hesitation. Master, in fact, Juzi knew Big Sister King Yu's true pain. Big Sister King Yu didn't feel pain because her power had weakened. She was worried that after she lost her original power, Master would put her on the shelf. When Master fights, Big Sister King Yu can only watch from the side and can't help Master with anything. This is what really hurts Big Sister King Yu. She only wants to fight for Master. This time, it was Guhan's turn to fall silent. However, Guhan didn't stay silent for too long before ordering Juzi, turn on the sound. I can't help King Yu, and I can't let her wait any longer. Let me bear the pain in her heart with her. As a result, Guhan stayed in the storage room and sat cross-legged on the ground without moving. He silently listened to King Yu's painful roars in his mind. After tens of minutes, King Yu's roars turned into unbridled cries. In the end, the cries became softer and softer until there was no more sound. Guhan's mind once again became completely quiet. What? Are you done venting? Guhan asked in his mind. Master, Big Sister King Yu's soul has consumed too much energy. She's tired and has fallen asleep. The one who answered Gohan was Juzi. Then let's go. My legs are numb from sitting too. Gohan bitterly smiled and stood up. After walking out of the storage room, he moved along a different route and prepared to leave Mount Tai prison. This new route required him to pass through a prison area and many prison gates. It was already 4 o'clock in the morning. Even the noisiest prison had quieted down. However, Gohan could clearly hear shouts coming from one of the gates of the prison. Let me out. It doesn't matter if I die, but Zhong Jian's sword isn't dead yet. Let me out. I want to save her. Clearly, the one who shouted this was none other than the sword-forging grandmaster who had turned Zhong Jian's sword into this state. Gohan was disdainful of this guy, but he couldn't pretend that he didn't hear what he said at this time. He said that Zhong Jian's sword was still alive. Didn't that mean that Zhong Jian's sword soul was still in its body? If Gohan took Zhong Jian's sword to the worldly furnace, it would only be a waste of effort. King Yu could not possess the Sword Maiden's body that had its own soul. Of course, it was also possible that this sword-forging grandmaster knew that he would die for sure, so he wanted to say some nonsense to deceive others and stall for as much time as possible so that he could live. After hesitating for a while, Gohan felt that he could not take any risks in this matter. If what he said was true, after the worldly furnace opened, King Yu, who could not possess the Sword Maiden's body, will be forced out of the body by its original owner. In the end, he would be burned into nothingness by the worldly furnace's flames and completely cease to exist in this world. This was something that Gohan could not accept. Zhao Hao, also known as Grandmaster Tianri, was yelling helplessly in his cell. He had been yelling for a whole hour already. Aside from a prison guard who came to look at him and scolded him a little, no one else paid any attention to him. However, Zhao Hao did not give up. He decided to shout until his throat was completely destroyed. Otherwise, a sword maiden that could still be saved would be forcefully melted into molten iron and die for real. Just as Zhao Hao's throat was about to become hoarse, he finally heard the long-awaited sound of the door turning. Shortly after, a man in ordinary clothes walked in. Strange. Why isn't this man wearing a police uniform? The prison guards in Taishan prison naturally had to wear police uniforms, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, no one would come here except for the prison guards. Therefore, Gohan, who appeared in regular clothes, seemed particularly strange. I'm a sword wielder sent by the Sword Committee. Gohan's personal terminal popped up his identity as a swordsman. Taishan prison reported your case to the Sword Committee, so the Sword Committee sent me here to understand the situation. Please tell me your situation again. All right. Gohan's explanation was reasonable, so Zhao Hao did not doubt it at all. He then told Gohan everything. Chapter 758. Zhao Hao could actually be considered a good person, as his intentions had always been for the sake of humanity and the sword ladies. This could be seen from the topic he had researched at the beginning. The full title of Zhao Hao's original research topic was How to Quickly Repair Broken Natural Sword Ladies with Artificial Intervention. Simply put, it was about repairing broken sword ladies manually. Up until now, there had been no effective way to repair broken sword ladies. Some sword-forging grandmasters could rely on their own abilities to repair a portion of broken natural sword ladies, but there were far too few of them, even rarer than Jiandi. The small portion that sword-forging grandmasters could repair was too small, amounting to less than 10% of the total number of broken swords. Thus, after the Great Apocalypse, the most common way to repair sword ladies was to wait silently. They were placed in the sword burial grounds, a place that had the miraculous ability to repair sword ladies, and waited for these broken sword ladies to slowly repair themselves in the sword burial grounds. This process would take at least 50 years. For example, Lian Yanling's leisurely celestial sword had been placed in the sword burial grounds after it had been broken. It had only been a few years since the leisurely celestial sword had finished repairing itself. The prerequisite for this was that the sword lady's soul had to be preserved. Once the soul in the sword lady's body was lost, the sword lady could only merge with the earth. After Zhao Hao became a sword-forging grandmaster, he was determined to change this situation. He researched a completely new method to repair broken swords, allowing the sword ladies placed in the sword burial grounds to see the light of day once more. Thus, Zhao Hao's original intentions were completely good. It was just that Zhao Hao had gradually gone astray in his research. He had originally planned to repair sword ladies, but he had accidentally discovered a method to make the broken fragments of a natural sword lady into an independent body. This method was to split the sword lady's soul in the broken sword, and then use the artificial sword lady's manufacturing technology and the high-purity dimensional crystal sword lady's original material formula to repair the two broken fragments into two identical natural sword ladies. This was actually similar to the survival ability of earthworms. If you used a sharp knife to cut an earthworm into two, after a period of time, you would find that the two parts of the earthworm did not die, but became two independent complete bodies, becoming two earthworms. Just by listening to it, one could tell how much this method violated human ethics. However, at that time, Zhao Hao had already entered a state of madness. He carried out the experiment without any hesitation. Then the experiment was reported by his disciple who could not accept what he had done, and he became a prisoner and was locked up in prison. However, when Zhao Hao's experimental plan and detailed experimental records were handed over to the Sword Committee, the entire Sword Committee was shocked by his ideas and was even more tempted by his plan. If Zhao Hao's experiment was successful, then wouldn't the more than 800 broken swords in the human's possession become 1,600 swords that could be used by humans? This would undoubtedly greatly increase the strength of the human race. In the face of survival, any ethical relationship was temporarily cast aside. At that time, under the dictatorship of Sword Immortal White Stallion Zhu Wudao reported Zhao Hao's matter to the Sword Committee headquarters, and then applied to allow Zhao Hao to continue his research. It was said that the Sword Committee headquarters held a meeting to discuss this for a long time, and in the end, they tacitly agreed to Zhu Wudao's plan. Thus, Zhao Hao's research could continue in the laboratory until 3 days ago, when he completely courted death and completely destroyed the soul of Zhong Dian's sword, which was the subject of the experiment. Actually, I've already carried out the preliminary research very well. After analyzing the original material of Zhong Dian's sword, I've obtained steel that is exactly the same as the original material, and I can guarantee that the two Zhong Dian swords that are repaired will be exactly the same. Zhao Hao told Gahan honestly. The most crucial part of the entire experiment is the step of splitting the sword lady's soul into two. How to ensure that after splitting the sword lady's soul into two, the soul of the sword lady can become two independent bodies and not dissipate. This is the most difficult problem. I've researched this problem for 30 years, and I finally made a breakthrough last month. Zhao Hao's face revealed a blissful expression, but this blissful expression soon turned into one of bitterness. But I failed in the end. The soul of Zhong Jian's sword, which was used for the experiment, disappeared the moment it was split. No matter how the apparatus scanned it, it could not find the sword lady's soul. Then, they determined that Zhong Jian's sword's soul had completely dissipated. Zhao Hao mumbled, and his emotions immediately became agitated. But I couldn't accept it. I couldn't believe it. I've researched for a whole 30 years. I've thought of every step, and I've used experiments to verify every detail. All the steps are feasible, but why did I fail when I put them together? Zhao Hao's expression became more and more pained as he spoke, but also became more and more passionate. So I thought, I've been thinking, no matter what others do to me, or where they want to lock me up, I don't care. I've been thinking about this problem day and night, and it was only an hour ago that I finally figured it out. I didn't fail. I definitely didn't fail. I'm a winner, and I've succeeded. Zhao Hao suddenly grabbed Gahan's hand tightly. Zhong Jian's sword didn't die. She only fell into a deep sleep the moment they were separated. Her soul must still be alive. That's impossible. Upon hearing Zhao Hao's words, Gahan replied resolutely, 3 grandmasters from Yuzhong City conducted an appraisal of Zhong Jian's sword at the same time. These 3 grandmasters used their own reputations to guarantee that there is no longer any sword lady's soul in Zhong Jian's sword. Could it be that those 3 grandmasters were lying? There were a total of 4 sword forging grandmasters in Yuzhong City. From the perspective of a sword forging grandmaster, the ability of a sword forging grandmaster was equal to that of an immortal sword wielder. The remaining sword forging grandmaster had also guaranteed that there was no soul in Zhong Jian's sword, so it was naturally more credible than Zhao Hao's words alone. However, one could hear the agitation in Gohan's voice. This was because Gohan's words were not only for Zhao Hao's ears, but also for Gohan himself. Unlike Zhao Hao, who looked forward to proving himself and that Zhong Jian's sword was still alive, Gohan actually hoped that Zhong Jian's sword's soul did not exist. Otherwise, where would King Yu's soul go? They're right. Zhong Jian's sword soul is indeed not in those 2 broken swords. Unexpectedly, Zhao Hao agreed with the other 3 grandmasters' judgment. However, he then said, Zhong Jian's sword soul is not in Zhong Jian's sword, but that doesn't mean that her soul has disappeared. Her soul is still alive. What do you mean? How is that possible? It's impossible for a sword lady's soul to exist in the air. Without the protection of the sword, her soul would have completely disintegrated in less than 10 seconds. Is there a problem with that? Gohan said in disbelief. That's right. It's true that a sword lady's soul can't exist in the air for more than 10 seconds. But who said that Zhong Jian lady's soul dissipated in the air? Is there anyone who can prove this? Zhao Hao quickly said. No one can prove that, but no one can prove that Zhong Jian lady's soul is still alive. Gohan answered stiffly. No, I can prove it. I can prove that Zhong Jian lady's soul is still alive. Zhao Hao became even more agitated. How are you going to prove it? I can bring you to Zhong Jian lady's soul. Isn't that the best proof? Zhao Hao grabbed Gohan with both hands. Then where do you think her soul is? Gohan glared at Zhao Hao. You have to give me enough reason to convince me. Otherwise, I'll treat it as something you made up to survive. Zhong Jian lady's soul is in my scalpel. Zhao Hao answered without hesitation. Scalpel? Gohan was obviously stunned. Zhao Hao continued, It's all my fault. I shouldn't have forged a scalpel made of the same material as the Zhong Jian sword, so that I could cut Zhong Jian lady's soul faster. At the moment of cutting, Zhong Jian lady's soul was not distributed into the 2 broken swords as planned. Instead, it was transferred into the scalpel. It's all my fault. I was so angry that I thought I killed Zhong Jian lady. I was in a state of confusion and didn't think of that at all. Zhao Hao's face was filled with regret. I only figured it out just now. Since the scalpel is made of the same material as the Zhong Jian sword, Zhong Jian lady's soul would naturally be transferred into the scalpel that was closest to her, and not the broken sword that was slightly further away. But the scalpel is just a small knife, and it's a knife. How can it be integrated with a sword lady's soul? Gohan mumbled to himself. The scalpel is just a term passed down from before the apocalypse. From its shape, both sides of the scalpel are sharp blades. It's completely different from a knife that has one thick side and one sharp side. Actually, the scalpel should be called a scalpel sword. Zhao Hao explained with a bitter smile. This was also how the academic world distinguished swords and knives after studying the existence of sword ladies for a long time. It explained why swords could become sword ladies, but not knives. P.S. Looking at it from a practical point of view, there are some who are double-edged. However, such knives are rare, so this book automatically ignores these rare knives. Here's the explanation. Now, there are 2 sword ladies' souls in the scalpel. This is a very dangerous thing. After being cut, the sword lady's soul has to be repaired by a soul-repairing fluid to regain its rationality. Otherwise, they will be like 2 wild beasts that will devour each other. One will only stop when the other is bitten to death. I suspect that the 2 souls in the scalpel are about to win. Once one of the souls fails, the other soul will definitely be pushed into the air. By then, both souls won't be able to survive, and Zhong Jian lady will really die. Zhao Hao said anxiously at the end. Chapter 759. After Zhao Hao told him the entire story, Gahan believed half of it. This was because there were two sword ladies' souls hidden inside the Juzi sword, and King Yu's soul had also entered the other sword. As long as Juzi willed it, she could expel King Yu's soul from her body. This was almost the same as Zhongdian sword's current predicament. However, on the other hand, Zhongdian's sword body was indeed empty. Zhongdian's sword soul was not in the sword. As long as Gahan hardened his heart, ignored Zhao Hao's words, and left with the broken Zhongdian sword, King Yu's soul would be able to reside in it without any problems. At the same time, it also announced the complete death of Zhongdian's sword soul. Zhao Hao told Gahan, although the scalpel was made of the same material as Zhongdian's sword, it was ultimately a replica made by humans. Perhaps the soul could exist in it, but it could not transform into a real sword lady. Only by using the original sword lady's body and using humans to repair it would it be possible to create two sword ladies. Although Zhongdian's sword's soul could stay in the scalpel for a while, as time passed, it would dissipate sooner or later. Therefore, if Gahan left with Zhongdian's sword's body, King Yu might be able to be reborn, but Zhongdian's sword's soul would definitely die. At that moment, Gahan hesitated. He knew that his next move would completely determine King Yu's fate. Should he use Zhongdian's sword's soul to dissipate in exchange for King Yu's rebirth, or should he give up on this rare opportunity and continue to wait like this for a lifetime? Sigh. Gahan sighed heavily in his heart, then asked Zhao Hao, "Where's your scalpel now?" "I don't know either," Zhao Hao said awkwardly. "After I was captured, all my things were confiscated by you. I have to ask the sword committee about my scalpel." Gahan stopped talking and immediately contacted Lu Shihua, who was far away in Yanjing City, through his personal terminal. He asked Lu Shihua to find the whereabouts of this batch of things. Very quickly, Lu Shihua replied. It turned out that Zhao Hao's original laboratory was an important piece of evidence, and no one dared to touch it. It was still there untouched. Therefore, Zhao Hao's scalpel should still be in that prison experiment. "Pack up and come with me to your lab now," Gahan said to Zhao Hao directly after the call with Lu Shihua. Gahan had to bring Zhao Hao along because other than Zhao Hao, Gahan did not know what to do next to redistribute the soul of the Zhongdian sword and the scalpel into the two broken swords. Moreover, Zhao Hao had already seen his true appearance. Once he found out that he was not a real prison guard, the fact that he had appeared in Mount Tai prison could no longer be concealed. Because of this, Gahan had to bring Zhao Hao along and lock him up somewhere. He would release him when the matter died down. He believed that Lu Lei would naturally help him deal with it, so Gahan did not have to worry too much. In Zhao Hao's eyes, Gahan must have been communicating with the Sword Committee just now. After obtaining the Sword Committee's approval, he would immediately bring him to the lab. Therefore, Zhao Hao did not doubt Gahan's orders at all. He simply packed up his things and left the prison cell with Gahan. Fortunately, when he brought Zhao Hao out of Mount Tai prison, no evil moths appeared. Everything went according to Gahan's plan. Under Lu Shihua's cover, they quietly left the heavily guarded Mount Tai prison. It was not until 5 or 6 hours later that Lu Shihua's remote control of Mount Tai prison ended. It was only then that the warden realized that Zhao Hao had disappeared from the prison. After that, the entire Mount Tai prison system was in a mess. More than 10 prison guards under the warden's rank were all fired. The few special forces also realized their wish to retire from the military. However, only God knew whether they became the personal special forces bodyguards of the city's beautiful campus belle. In fact, Gahan's actions that night could be summed up in one sentence. He went from one prison to another. However, compared to Mount Tai prison, the other prison's defense was practically non-existent. There were only a few police detectives guarding the entrance. Lu Shihua disguised himself slightly, and Gahan successfully brought him into its original lab. The rest of the matter went smoothly. Zhao Hao quickly found the scalpel on his table. Therefore, Zhao Hao immediately activated his soul-scanning equipment and began to scan the scalpel. He discovered that things were just as he had imagined. There were indeed 2 souls of sword maidens in the scalpel. Oh no, One of the sword maiden's soul is about to be squeezed out of the scalpel. Zhao Hao suddenly exclaimed. The smile on his face instantly disappeared, replaced by extreme anxiety. Just like what Zhao Hao had said earlier, the battle between the souls and the scalpel was about to end. One of the souls gradually showed signs of weakness and was finally squeezed to the edge of the scalpel. Perhaps in a few minutes, this soul would be squeezed out of the scalpel and completely disappear into thin air. The other soul was not much better. In a situation where it had exhausted a large amount of soul power in the battle and could not be replenished by the soul restoration fluid, this victorious soul would gradually disintegrate and disappear sooner or later. In other words, if Gahan had come a few minutes later, Zhong Dian's soul would definitely have died. It's over. Zhao Hao, who understood this scene, slumped to the ground, despair written all over his face. It's over. It's too late. I can't save these two souls. I'm a sinner through and through. What's wrong? Aren't the two souls still in the scalpel? Can't you separate them right now? Seeing Zhao Hao's despairing expression, Guhan asked in a puzzled manner. So what if they're separated? Zhao Hao said weakly. After they're separated, they have to be placed in their original broken sword fragments. I originally wanted to ask you to apply to the sword committee to bring the broken sword fragments here after confirming that the souls are in the scalpel. Only then can I separate them. But the speed of their battle far exceeded my expectations. I originally estimated that they would fight for at least another 2 days, but I didn't expect it to have already reached such a tragic stage. I'm useless. I'm the one who caused their deaths. Zhao Hao wailed, but suddenly felt something thrown on his leg. Zhao Hao looked down and saw that it was the remains of the 2 broken swords of Zhong Dian. Sir, how did this broken sword? You don't have to ask about that. Hurry up and separate the souls. You don't have time anymore. Hearing Gahan's words, Zhao Hao instantly jumped up from the ground. He grabbed the scalpel and rolled back to his workbench with a broken sword. Fortunately, in order to protect the scene, all the equipment in the entire workshop was not moved. Zhao Hao could immediately use these equipment that he was extremely familiar with to carry out his work. After working for about 20 minutes, Zhao Hao, who was fully focused, finally relaxed. He had successfully placed the 2 souls back into the broken sword, and Zhong Jian had regained its vitality. Seeing this scene, Gahan's eyes were filled with both joy and pain. He was naturally happy that the soul of a sword maiden had been redeemed by him. He was painful because when this sword body could not be used, when would the day of King Yu's rebirth be? Gahan sighed and prepared to leave the laboratory. Since Zhao Hao had already repaired Zhong Dian's soul, there was no need for Gahan to steal Zhong Dian's body. In this way, there was no need for Gahan to hide his identity. Gahan only needed to confess everything to his master, Lu Lei. He believed that with Lu Lei's help, he would be able to quickly fabricate the truth that Gahan had seen through the information that Zhong Dian's soul was not dead. Then, he would rush back to Yuzhong City to help repair Zhong Dian's body. Of course, this explanation was full of loopholes. Anyone with a bit of intelligence would be able to deduce that there were many things wrong with this explanation. However, the matter had a comedic ending. This was a family matter in Yuzhong City. Since Sword Immortal 9 Heavens Lu Lei, who was in charge of Yuzhong City, did not pursue this matter, outsiders could not say anything. Was it a bad thing for Gahan to save a sword maiden? Therefore, Gahan decided to leave. After explaining to Lu Lei that night, he would return to Yanjing City and continue looking for a chance to revive King Yu. Sir, where are you going? Gahan had just taken a step when he heard Zhao Hao ask anxiously behind him. Your matter is over, and there is no need for me to stay here. You can rest in the laboratory for a while. The sword committee will send someone else to deal with this matter soon. Gahan said to Zhao Hao plainly, Sir, you're not the real swordsman sent by the sword committee, right? Zhao Hao suddenly asked. That's right, Gahan admitted readily. He was not interested in how Zhao Hao discovered his identity. This was because he did not deliberately hide his actions along the way. As one of the 4-sword forging grandmasters in Yuzhong City, Zhao Hao's intelligence was naturally higher than that of ordinary people. It was not surprising that he could discover his identity through some details. Then let me make a bold guess. Sir, you want to steal the broken sword of Zhong Dian? Zhao Hao said again. Yes, Gahan still admitted. Then let me ask one more thing. Sir, are you the sword bearer of Zhong Dian? He thought Zhao Hao would keep guessing correctly, but he guessed wrong here. He actually guessed that Gahan was the sword bearer of Zhong Dian. This was 1,000 miles wrong. Chapter 760. Sir, you're really devoted to Zhong Dian's sword lady. Zhao Hao exclaimed. Sir, you must be unwilling to see Zhong Dian's sword lady turn into a puddle of molten iron. So you want to steal her broken sword and keep it by your side forever, right? Zhao Hao had guessed that Gahan was the sword wielder of Zhong Dian's sword. It was not strange when one thought about it, because other than the sword wielder of Zhong Dian's sword, no one would take such a huge risk to steal a broken sword. Zhao Hao did not expect that someone would want to use the broken sword mistress to be reborn as another sword mistress. From a certain point of view, this was even more despicable than Zhao Hao's research. Gahan did not answer Zhao Hao's question. His attitude of neither admitting nor denying confirmed Zhao Hao's guess. The sword wielder before him was undoubtedly the sword mistress of Zhong Dian's sword. However, Zhao Hao did not know that the real sword wielder of Zhong Dian's sword had already died in battle after Zhong Dian's sword broke. This sword wielder had been an ancient sword wielder for over 40 years. When Yuan Ko rushed out of the core zone's quantum teleportation formation, he did not show any fear, nor did he choose to escape. Instead, he stood closely with his sword mistress and used his life to compose a great song of praise for the sword wielder, although no one had ever sung this battle song, and no one really cared about this sword wielder's heroic battle. Why are you telling me this? Is there a reason? Gahan turned around and asked. Of course there's a reason. Zhao Hao nodded. I should have done my research without any hesitation, but without your help today, I'm afraid I've made a huge mistake. I'm afraid I've already made a huge mistake, so I have to tell you something and let you make a choice. What is it? I want to tell you that my research is already halfway done. Next, I only need to use the materials I prepared to repair these 2 broken swords. Then, I'll be able to obtain 2 identical sword mistresses of Zhong Dian's sword. That's great. Isn't that what you've always wanted? Guhan said. This is indeed what I want, but this isn't what you want, said Zhao Hao with a sigh. Once my experiment succeeds, Sword Lady Zhong Dian will be reborn. But if that's the case, the original Sword Lady of Zhong Dian will also disappear completely. The reborn Zhong Dian will have nothing to do with you, my lord. You have to synchronize again to become a Sword Lady. But Lady Zhong Dian's purple palace still has Lady Zhong Dian's sword mark. I think Lady Zhong Dian knows better than me what this means. Gohan chose to remain silent. He knew what Zhao Hao wanted to express. After the wielder's sword lady was broken, the sword scar in the wielder's purple palace would not disappear. In other words, the wielder would not be able to synchronize with the ancient sword grade sword lady. In vulgar terms, this was called being a dog in the manger, and this occupation was the life of the sword bearer. If Gahan was really the wielder of the sword of Final Destination, then there were only 2 paths in front of Gahan. He could either send the sword of Final Destination to the sword burial ground and wait for it to slowly recover, or he could find a sword forging grandmaster and ask them to find a way to repair the sword of Final Destination. If he really followed Zhao Hao's plan and split the sword of Final Destination into 2 independent entities, even if the sword of Final Destination was reborn, it would no longer have any connection with its wielder. The wielder would also lose his ancient sword grade sword lady forever. That was why Zhao Hao wanted to ask Gahan about Guhan's decision at this juncture. Unfortunately, Gahan was not the wielder of the sword of Final Destination, so there was nothing for him to worry about. He said straightforwardly, just do it according to your plan. If you really succeed, it will be the fortune of the entire human race. You don't have to worry about these small things. Lord is so righteous. I, Zhao Hao, admire you. Hearing Gohan's words, Zhao Hao sincerely admired Gahan. From the time Gahan had snuck in a Mount Tai prison to steal the sword of Final Destination, Zhao Hao could tell that Gahan had deep feelings for the sword of Final Destination. However, with such deep feelings, when faced with the overall situation of the entire human race, Gahan had decisively given up on his own interests and chosen the interests of the human race. How could Zhao Hao not admire this? Haha, actually, Lord, you don't have to give up like this. Zhao Hao, have a way to let you be together with the Sword Lady of Final Destination again. It turned out that Zhao Hao was just messing around with Guhan. Now, he was telling Guhan that he already had a solution to the problem. What idea do you have? It's very simple. Since I, Zhao Hao, can split the Sword Lady of Final Destination's soul, I can put them back together, Zhao Hao said with a smile. But if you put the soul back together, what will happen to your research? Guhan asked. The research can still continue. Zhao Hao laughed. Actually, my most important goal is to prove that the two swords of Final Destination made from my special materials are the same as the real sword of Final Destination. They can both become the bodies of natural sword ladies. Later, I'll fuse the Lady of Final Destination's soul back together and place it into one of the broken swords. Then, I'll use the materials I've developed to successfully repair this short sword. If this repaired broken sword can reconnect with the Lady of Final Destination's sword mark in your hands and become a sword lady, it will prove that my research has succeeded. At the same time, I can return the Lady of Final Destination to you. Isn't that killing two birds with one stone? Zhao Hao said with a proud expression. He was waiting for Gahan to thank him. However, Zhao Hao didn't know that his words had a completely different meaning in Gahan's ears. If it was really as Zhao Hao said, and only one of the two broken swords was used for the rebirth of the Sword of Final Destination, didn't that mean that after the other broken sword was repaired, it would become an empty body, perfect for King Yu to use? Good idea. Guhan revealed a pleading expression. Lord Grandmaster, I'll leave everything to you. Can you repair it now? I can't stay here for too long, or else I'll be locked up in the disciplinary committee. You've done me a favor. This is nothing, Zhao Hao said with a smile. He seemed to think of something, and his expression suddenly became extremely awkward. This might really have to wait a little longer. Although it's easier to fuse the souls again than to cut them apart, it requires an extremely important item, which is the soul restoration fluid. I must use the soul restoration fluid to strengthen the two souls that are already extremely weak, and use the soul restoration fluid as a dissolving agent so that the two souls can slowly fuse together in the soul restoration fluid. But the Sword Committee only gives me one bottle of soul recovery fluid every year, and I've already used the bottle this year. I'm afraid it'll take some effort to get another bottle. Can you wait a few more days? No, wait a few more weeks? Zhao Hao smiled bitterly. The soul restoration fluid was actually the soul restoration fluid, which was the crucial fluid that Maiden had used for her rebirth. It was just that the swordsmiths and the doctors had different names for it. The soul restoration fluid was extremely rare, and there were not many bottles produced in the entire Yuzhong city in a year. Only a grandmaster swordsmith like Zhao Hao had a quota of one bottle every year, and it was extravagantly used as a research material. Other swordsmiths could not even dream of seeing it. If Zhao Hao wanted to get another bottle, forget about a few weeks, he might not even be able to get one in a few months. How could Guhan have the time to wait for him for a few weeks? Hence, Guhan directly took out a bottle of soul restoration fluid from his dimensional bag and placed it in front of Zhao Hao. Hurry up, I'm in a hurry. This bottle of soul restoration fluid was given to Gahan by Lu Lei to replenish the portion of soul restoration fluid that had already been used in the Immortal Sword Grade Medical Pod. Unfortunately, things were urgent, so Guhan could only give this bottle of soul restoration fluid to Zhao Hao. Sir, who exactly are you? Only then did Zhao Hao realize that the swordsmiths in front of him had an extraordinary status in Yuzhong City. What swordsmiths could casually take out a bottle of soul restoration fluid from their dimensional bag? At the very least, they had to be a direct descendant or successor of an emperor swordsman. Zhao Hao did not say anything else, nor did he ask any more questions. He picked up the bottle of soul restoration fluid and immediately started working. Not only did Zhao Hao need to reintegrate the two souls, but he also needed to use the forging electric furnace in the workshop to repair the two broken swords with the materials he had made himself into two complete swordsmiths. By the time all this work was done, the sky had already brightened. Sounds of footsteps could be heard from around the laboratory. This was the prison guards on duty. They would soon discover that the previously closed laboratory had begun working again. Oh no! Why are the lights in the laboratory lit up? Everyone be on guard! A warning cry came from outside the laboratory. It seemed that they had discovered the situation here. Sir, fortunately, I did not disappoint you. At this moment, Zhao Hao placed the two brand new Zhongdian swords in front of Gahan. Gahan carefully observed the two Zhongdian swords and found that one of them was no different from a normal natural swordsmith's. It was full of life. The other one was much duller, without the slightest trace of life. It was not even comparable to a man-made ship maiden. Clearly, this was the soulless sword suitable for the king of Yu's body. As expected of Grandmaster Tianri, your swordsmithing skills leave me speechless. Gahan praised sincerely. I wouldn't dare. Zhao Hao smiled. Sir, you'd better escape quickly. Otherwise, when the prison guards rush in, your identity will be exposed. No, I want you to leave with me. For some reason, Gohan suddenly changed his mind and wanted to bring Grandmaster Tianri Zhao Hao along. Don't worry about me. These prison guards won't dare to do anything to me. Zhao Hao gestured for him not to worry. Anyway, the Zhongdian swords have already been repaired. No matter how big a mistake I made, I don't deserve to die. At most, I'll return to Mount Tai prison and stay for a few years. Just leave me here. Hurry up and leave. Sorry. Unfortunately, Gahan did not want to waste any more words with Zhao Hao. A sword chi struck Zhao Hao's Feng Chi acupoint, and Zhao Hao instantly fainted. Gahan carried Zhao Hao, and the moment the prison guards rushed into the laboratory, he ran away with Zhao Hao. Before the prison guards could even see his figure clearly, Gahan had already left the prison. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.